catch. It's not that hard, okay? All right, get the out of here.
I'm going to talk a lot about drills and fundamentals.
Watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it.
On 93.5.
Watch it.
And 107.5.
Boom, baby.
The Fan.
NBA Draft Day is here. Good Thursday morning. Kevin Bowen, Jay Query, and Mark Dykton. Boys, any shenanigans last night with the longest daylight of the year?
Longest winning streak in nearly 70 years for the Reds.
Don't look now, but here come the Red Legs.
That's right.
Gosh, I love the energy with that, Mark. Thank you. Yeah, you know, when you do something the Big Red Machine didn't even do, that's pretty darn good.
It is, I think the most amazing part of the Reds' 11-game win streak is not that it's the longest win streak ever for a team that lost 100 games the previous year. Not that, you know, is Ellie De La Cruz I don't know if that's clearly a spark for them. But it's the fact that, in my opinion, and I know that the 29 Yankees are, I didn't see them play. I didn't really see the Big Red Machine play. But the fact that the 75 nor 76 Reds ever put together an 11-game win streak is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah, that element stands out to me. The other one, Jake, is the closeness of these games. I mean, extremely entertaining. And it's not like they've been dominant. Of course, 11 wins, but the wins are by 4 runs, 1 run, 1 run, 1 run, 3, 1, 7, 2, 1, 2. And yesterday, down 3-0, 5 unanswered. Jake Fairley with a 2-run homer in the 8th. Like, that's kind of what their MO has been this season, of a ton of comeback victories, and 11 in a row and a well-deserved day off for the Red Legs today, as they are 40-35.
It kind of always gives you pause when a win streak has games that are that close, because you're like, man, that could all come in like a house of cards, right?
Yeah, you're like, is this a fluke? Which with the Reds, typically, that is the case. Greg Rakestraw going to join us here a little bit later in the 7 o'clock hour. I know we usually have Rake on Fridays. We'll bump him up a day because it'll be a lot of draft reaction tomorrow. Scott Agnes at 9 o'clock going to join us to preview tonight. Again, our coverage will begin at 7, the draft at 8, and 24 hours after we last chatted with you. Jake, I said it several times yesterday. I wanted to see the Pacers turn one of those late first-round picks into a 2024 pick. And lo and behold, they did that yesterday with a trade for Denver to get a first-rounder next year. I'm a big fan of this move.
Yeah, I think it's a really good move as well. And do you remember, Kevin, I guess it would have been last year, obviously, when we were scoreboard watching a lot for the Cleveland Cavaliers to figure out what was going to happen with that Pacers pick and whether or not they were going to get a first-round pick that year.
Karis LeVert trade. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what this one's going to be like next year, right? Because it's conditional on like 3 different teams, and who has the worst record. It's protected in a couple of areas, but in terms of the pick for next year that they received.
Yeah, I thought Tony East did a wonderful job clarifying this yesterday. Indiana trades number 29 and 32 tonight. They get Denver's 40th pick tonight, and then a first-rounder from Denver next year. That first-rounder technically is an Oklahoma City pick. And again, this is very confusing, but these are the 4 teams that come into play here. The Pacers will either get Houston's selection, Utah's selection, Oklahoma City's selection, or the Clippers. They will get the worst of those 4 teams' picks.
Now let me ask you this. When you say the worst, you mean
the lowest in round 1.
Okay, and again, pardon me for being an idiot here. When you say lowest, see, to me, lowest means like 18 versus 1.
Well,
to some people,
worst is probably the best way to describe it. The worst pick, the one closest to round 2.
Okay, that's my point being, I think there were some people that thought by worst, I think there were some people that read that and thought whichever team has the worst record, they get that pick.
So basically how it would have looked this year is Houston has pick number 4, Utah has pick number 9, Oklahoma City has pick 12, and the Clippers have pick 20. So if it would have gone off this year's final standings, the Pacers would be getting the 20th pick in the 2024 NBA draft. And again, this year they traded the 29th pick. So, by all accounts, it's going to be something in the 20s. I would assume the Clippers or, hell, maybe the Thunder put it together and get into the playoffs next season. But I am a fan of this. And you bring up the Karis LeVert thing. A couple of reasons why I like it. One, in no way, shape, or form did you have room for 5 draft picks tonight. You've got 12 guys under contract for next season. You don't have room to spend picks on each of those 5 guys. 2, I think you want to continue to make sure that you have some sort of future resources in the cupboard, because you never know when you want to turn the leaf over and say, all right, we're done acquiring picks. We now need to make some win now moves. And when you look at the Karis LeVert trade, for example, or you look at what Boston did in trading with the Pacers for Malcolm Brogdon, at some point you're going to be in a position you would hope as a franchise where, all right, we want to trade the pick for a player because we feel like that player is the missing ingredient. And that, I think, is what part of this deal is. You now have 2 first-round picks for next year. You still have, 4 picks tonight. But I am a big fan of making sure that you keep that cupboard stocked a little bit if and when you want to all of a sudden change your tune and say, all right, we're done acquiring the assets. Let's go out there and try to turn some of these future picks into actual players.
The other thing I think it does, it kind of buys you time, Kevin. Like, the Pacers this year, they have a lot of picks, or they had a lot of picks, and it was unrealistic to think that they were going to have the roster space or the room or whatever to plant all of those picks within their franchise. So this sends 2 of them out. I mean, you net 1 spot, if you will, because you're sending 2 out and you're getting 1 back for this year, kind of in the same vicinity. But you also are, because of the fact that you're taking 2 29 and 32, and to your point, probably making it like a 20 next year. That buys you some time to figure out who you can run with and where you can make room for another young first rounder next year. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you have to keep tweaking and building this. Yes, did you speed up the rebuild a little bit with your success this past season? Certainly, but it's not finished. It's not 2023 offseason and you're done. You have to continue to try and kind of alter some things and make sure that the pieces stay in place, and maybe you need to add a piece that at this current juncture it doesn't look like you necessarily need. And I've said this 1,000 times about the Pacers. When you take the GM or the president job in a market like this in the NBA, the draft just matters more. Draft picks mean more. You're not going to attract the type of free agents like other markets can. So the more draft picks you have and the ability to trade those draft picks, the better. So I thought it was a smart move by Kevin Pritchard. And so that means tonight it looks like this. Pick number 7, pick number 26, and then that Denver pick number 40 and 55. So they've gone from 5 selections to 4.
Yeah, they netted 1, basically. Or they lost 1, if you will.
Yeah, 2 in round 1, then that 40th pick in round 2, and the 55th pick also in round 2.
Good morning to you, by the way. It's a Thursday. Jay Query, that's the voice of Kevin Bowen. Mark Dykton here as well. It's Kevin and Query on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. A lot of talk about the NBA draft coming up tonight. Also the Reds, and I'm not trying to make light of it at all. It would seem as though the submarine story, unfortunately, is not going to have a happy ending, right? Are we past the time of them being able to do like a rescue and probably now a search?
Are we still giggling about it?
I think that here's the thing. I don't think that I'm out of bounds in saying this. It's one of those. I mean, it is such a horrific situation from a humanitarian standpoint that it's almost like there's no way to take in the news of it all than just like have to like chuckle at kind of the absurdity of. Again, I want to go back to there's not a single funny thing about what's happened to these folks. There is a totally incredulous thing about how it came to be that way, and that's what people are chuckling about. Just like in the more and more stories are coming out of people like within that, and I'm not saying I don't want it to come off like, well, that's what they get. But I mean, that company that built that thing, I mean, every story that's come out is like people within the own company itself were like, yeah, this has no business going down and doing this thing. Like, this is not ready for this.
Yeah, we're hoping for a miracle at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, even if they locate it, which I hope they do, bringing it back up is a whole different animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, see, from a time standpoint with the oxygen and all of that, yeah, just awful. I saw the NBA All-Star announcement yesterday. Did you see that for Saturday night here of All-Star weekend? I
just saw like a thing about that it was in the news that the countdown was on and the mayor held a press conference.
So they announced yesterday that for All-Star weekend, the Saturday night activities will be over at Lucas Oil Stadium. At first, I was just kind of like surprised by it. The more I read about it, though, I'm like, wow, this is I think a really cool idea, and it allows for many more fans to be in the building Saturday night and to experience All-Star Weekend, and it also allows for much cheaper tickets. I know Scott Agnes was over there at the press conference, so we'll talk with him a little bit more about it coming up at 9 o'clock. But basically, it's going to look like, picture the Final Four setups that we've had in Lucas Oil Stadium. So the court will be kind of in that south end zone. And obviously, the viewing lines in that building are not ideal. But for a lot of people, I think they're just going to want to check off the box and say, yeah, I was able to go to
I was part of the festivities.
All-Star Weekend. And so Saturday night, the three-point contest, the dunk contest, the skills competition inside of Lucas Oil, the attendance for that, they say, will be around 35,000 seats. And these ticket prices, the first 10,500 tickets are going to go on sale to people in Indiana coming up late next month. So we get first dibs on it, and the ticket prices, $24, $49, and $79. That seems pretty manageable to me.
Very.
And again, you double the capacity in going over there on Saturday night. Obviously, the game Sunday will be back inside of Gainbridge Fieldhouse. But this is a little bit of a wrinkle. We haven't seen really many host cities do this. I like it. I think it's cool.
Now, this is the opposite of the way things were in 1985, the only other time the NBA All-Star Game came here. In 1985, when the NBA All-Star Game was here, your MVP was Ralph Sampson, by the way. Probably the most iconic image of that All-Star Game weekend was Michael Jordan in the dunk contest against Dominique Wilkins. And all of the pre-festivities, the dunk contest, the three-point shootout, were at Market Square Arena. And then on Sunday, the All-Star Game was in the Hoosier Dome.
Yeah.
Now it's the other way around, right? Now it's the Dome on Saturday, and then the more intimate feel of the game itself at Gainbridge Fieldhouse on Sunday.
So you get a bigger crowd, much more manageable price point. For us in this state.
What is the price for a ticket to the All-Star Game? Can the general public even buy tickets?
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult for that. I don't know. We'll ask Scott that at 9. I think it would be difficult to get one of the coveted, whatever it is. How many? Is it 17,000 inside of Gainbridge?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're going to want to experience this, the Saturday night option is your best bet. I would assume it's got a very corporate-y feel to it on Sunday.
I would think that's correct.
So again, this will be Saturday, February 17th. If you look at kind of the renderings of the court, again, it very much looks like a Final Four where the court is in that south end zone at Lucas Oil. They'll throw up a big curtain, and then I guess on the other side of that, throughout the evening, there will be some concerts and things like that. So I was curious, what twist and what changes would we, Indianapolis, do as a host city, and this appears to be that. Again, Scott, I think, was at the All-Star Game in Utah last year, and he mentioned that, there were times where you would have to get on a 20-minute bus ride for, practices and interview sessions. Obviously here, you're not going to have to do that.
Right.
So I thought that was a cool idea by the host committee in doing that.
The other thing, too, someone just asked me, they're like, why wouldn't they just play the game in the Dome? I think an aspect of that answer lies in this. As I'd mentioned, things were different nearly 40 years ago, the last time we did this here in Indy. I think that corporate sponsorship of the NBA is such that I don't know this, But my very large assumption would be that when you have an arena that was built for the NBA franchise and the corporate sponsor dollars that go into that, the Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Gamebridge is paying that money partially, well, almost entirely. Sure, they have concerts there. Sure, the state finals are there. But a large percentage of that sponsorship is tied to the fact that it's the home of the Indiana Pacers. The signage inside the arena, so much of that is tied to and directly related to sponsorship dollars to support the NBA. The NBA would be adamant that their showcase event would be held inside of the venue that best allows eyeballs to their sponsors.
That's a good point.
I mean, sure, you could put a Gamebridge sign in Lucas Oil and you could put, the other signs, but I think the authenticity of the money that went into the venue under the understanding that that money was being paid because that's the venue where NBA events are held leads to that responsibility of making sure that that's where it's executed.
Another thing to mention, the host committee is going to purchase and hand out 2,400 tickets to Saturday night to nonprofits and community organizations here in the Indy area. So again, Saturday night, 3-point skills dunk contest inside of Lucas Oil, 35,000 tickets ranging from $24 to $79. A third of those tickets of the 35,000 go on sale to us right here in the state of Indiana. That's coming up on July 24th. So kudos to the host committee for that one.
By the way, you guys had mentioned, Mark, did you finish the show Jury Duty?
Yes.
Is it?
Did you laugh, Mark?
We did, yeah.
How many episodes is it?
8.
And they're all like 20 minutes each?
Uh-huh.
Because I watched the first one, and I guess it just kind of is great laying the groundwork. I mean, there were a couple of chuckles, but I didn't find it like overly like. So does it get better?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're laying the groundwork on the first episode.
I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Maddie's still laughing about it.
Okay.
Keep going. Hang in there.
Yeah, give it a chance.
I wasn't ready to bail on it altogether. It was. I felt like it was getting a tough sell, and because I think Shannon was kind of like, okay. It's okay. But, I was waiting for the hijinks. Does that make sense? Because you guys were complimentary of it.
Yeah, they have to. And for those who don't know, the Jury Duty show is on Amazon Prime. It's a show where this guy thinks he's on a documentary style.
And that guy is not an actor, right?
No, he's on a documentary style thing about jury duty, but
he plays his role so well.
The twist is that he is the only real person. Everyone else, literally everybody that walks the halls, that's on the jury, the judge, the police officer, everyone else is an actor.
So here's my question. Because you just said that, Kevin, he plays his role so well.
Well, yes, he's not an actor, but he's the perfect sort of personality and temperament to what you would want in that role.
So he is literally, though, not aware of it.
He's
correct?
oblivious. He's in the clouds.
I mean, that part alone. So once they got, this seems like a huge roll of the dice, though, because what if they got all the way done with it?
Yeah, if they got you, they'd be in trouble. You'd be way too curious. Yeah.
Is that a compliment?
Sure.
But what I'm saying is, what if they got all the way done with it, and then he was like, no, I'm not signing off on you guys using me like that.
Yeah, I guess it's a risk you take, and you try to sweeten the commas and the zeros on it.
I'd be holding out for a long time.
Milking that.
Heck, are you kidding me? Did you watch college baseball last night?
Florida moving on, right? And LSU Wake Forest. We got a big-time pitching matchup to join Florida in the title game.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed to see TCU lose.
Yeah, the Horned Frogs.
Florida, it was in the 9th when Florida took it, right?
Yeah, so Florida is in the championship series. They will await the winner of Wake and LSU. LSU wins last night to keep their season alive and set up this winner-go-home game tonight. And I guess we have a pitching matchup tonight, which, I feel like when you kind of get deep into these respective tournament runs, you inevitably get a team that's like, boy, none of our starters are ready to go. It's going to be a bullpen night. We're just scrambling at this point in the postseason. Tonight, each of these starters for LSU and Wake supposedly are supposed to be top 15 picks.
Making fun to watch, right?
So if the NBA draft starts to bore you,
I know Wake's pitching staff is what has, left. That's the one that has put them in this great stratosphere this year, supposedly.
Yeah, they've been really good all season long. So down to 3 teams in Omaha. And obviously tonight's the NBA draft. I continue to be a fan of a Jarris Walker or a Taylor Hendricks. Jake, anybody else you wouldn't mind seeing there at pick 7 for the Pacers if indeed they continue to stand pat over the next 12 hours?
You know, I have not seen them play. I can't imagine that one of those Thompson brothers is there.
Maybe
Walker Hendricks. I think the third name that, you mentioned Walker Hendricks. I think Cam Whitmore of Villanova, if he's there, he's very intriguing. And then, but I have a feeling, and I want to make very clear, I have zero knowledge on this. Zero.
I thought you were going to sing a Black Eyed Peas song there.
But I have an odd feeling that you cannot rule out them taking Grady Dick at that spot.
At 7.
Yes.
Gosh, all this talk about defense, and that's the path they go?
I'm just saying, I don't know that. I have nothing to base that on other than just, I don't know.
Yeah, a team that ranked 30th in scoring defense and 29th in rebounding. I think Grady Dick will be a fine pro, but that cannot be the selection in my mind at 7. Walker and Hendricks are different types of players, but both of them, you mentioned defense first, which I think is really, really important. It's just kind of the flavor of what you want, assuming both will be there, which is probably not an assumption that is fair to make. It seems like there is some chatter about one, probably Walker of the two, that would go ahead of Indiana there at 7. So we'll get into that today. No shock probably to people in this market. You see Malcolm Brogdon failed physical on that trade yesterday.
I know that trade was, it had been circling around and commented on for forever, right?
So you have Kristaps Porzingis heading to Boston and Marcus Smart to Memphis. Those were the headliners. I think Boston actually gets 2 first-round picks. Washington involved as the third team. Doesn't Marcus Smart just fit Memphis?
1,000% yes. Is that are they bringing in Marcus Smart to be the veteran tutor for Ja Morant?
Well, and obviously I would assume this means Dylan Brooks is gone.
I think they basically said as much, right? I wonder where Dylan Brooks is going to end up, because for those unfamiliar, Dylan Brooks was the guy against the Lakers that spouted off and was like, LeBron can't guard. I can't remember what he said, but he basically challenged LeBron, and then he went out and shot 20% in the series, and LeBron had triple doubles every game, and it was just like, what are we doing here? I like the challenge. He just seemed like kind of a knucklehead, and he kind of shot them out of that series. Porzingis is fascinating to me because he is a unicorn. There's no doubt about it. But Porzingis is kind of one of those guys, Kevin. I'm like, are we still doing this?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, how many games has he even played? He could shoot. I saw him here. I think it was last year. One of the few games where he was he's seemingly health is an issue with him. There was a game here where he hit his first 5 threes in the first 4 minutes of the game, it felt like. It's like, man, this guy obviously he's a mega talent, but let's see I want to see how many games he's played. I could be way off on this, but doesn't it feel like he hasn't played a lot of games?
Yeah, I felt like last year was a little bit healthier. I don't know. It could be.
Yeah, okay, he played 65 games last year, but he played a total of 51 games. 51, 43, 47. He's never played more than 72 in a season. He played 65 a year ago. But last year he averaged, Porzingis still gave you 23 a game, okay? That just seems 23 and 7 per game.
Yeah, losing Smart, I think will be something to keep an eye on.
Smart is a key player for them.
Yeah, and does a lot of the dirty work. So he is off to Memphis. That's probably the first kind of big deal we've seen here. And obviously today, we'll continue to monitor things leading into tonight. Jake, you think the trade, so no more 29, no more 32. The Pacers have 26-40. Does that mean that they're too high at 26 for Trayce Jackson-Davis and too low for him at 40?
That's a really good question. I think 26 is right. I think 26 is right around when you're starting to open the door for Jackson-Davis to walk into the draft, if you will. It does feel like, Kevin, when you had 26, 29, 32, it felt like that gives you a little bit of a safety net to play with one of them and maybe go outside the box, and maybe Trace Jackson Davis would have been that, and that just based on what they need. So I don't know. If they take him at 26 now, it means they really, really, really feel like, no, this is the guy that's better than everybody else at that spot. I think that's around the area where he's going to start being, when they do during the draft, they have that list of best player available.
Yeah,
I think his name starts to, on that little ticker, starts to appear around 26.
I'm sure teams give false promises to a lot of prospects, but for what it's worth, I think Trace was told by Golden State that they like him at 19. Now, I guess you can insert your jokes here, a naive nature to, how many prospects are they telling? Hey, we like you at 19. Well, yeah, we also like 5 other people. And if they're on the board, we like you a little bit higher than that.
Apparently, The Athletic has said that at 40, which is the pick that the Pacers just acquired, that 40 is where they would take Trace Jackson Davis. That there is a mock from The Athletic that has him going to the Pacers at 40. I think 25 to 30, the back end of that, like 26, 27, 28, somewhere around there is where his name will start to be glossed over or, looked at by teams. And then I'll be curious to see if he falls to 40. If he was there at 40, I would agree. He is a known commodity. You know what he can do. It might be limitation in what he can do versus the potential of what other players can do in multiple areas. But in Jackson Davis's, it's kind of like this. If you are building a house and you've got your choice between one guy that is kind of a handyman that can do a lot of different things, none of them exceptionally well, but he's a handyman that can do a lot of things, or they say, or we can send you a guy that is one of the best roofers and guys laying the hardwoods in the neighborhood. He can only do those 2 things, but he does those 2 things really well. Do you get the guy that you can just kind of put anywhere and have him work for tomorrow on the piping and tomorrow on the painting and what? Or do you get the guy and you say, I'm just going to go ahead and get my flooring and roofing taken care of?
Yeah,
Jackson Davis is that latter guy.
I think a lot of the dilemma when you get into round 2 is, do you take the accomplished college player who, to your point, Jake, does 1 or 2 things maybe really well, or do you take the flyer on the international guy?
And again, one of them turns out to be Draymond Green and the other turns out to be, Nikola Jokic. Or one of them turns out to be Nikolai Shkidavili. Yeah,
and there's still an element for the Pacers of, do they have roster spots? Guaranteed contracts, I guess right now it would be 7 to 26. That's 14 guys under contract for next year. You're very quickly getting into 2-way deals. This is another reason why I just felt like there was no way you were going to spend 5 draft picks, and why yesterday's trade to get a first-rounder for 2024 made a whole lot of sense to me. I'm Kevin Bowen. He's Jake Query. Mark Dykton with us as well. Greg Rakestraw going to join us here in about 15 minutes. Scott Agnes, more on the Pacers draft leading in tonight. I think Scott mentioned it yesterday. After that trade, he felt like that the Pacers would still be pretty active on the trade front. So we'll chat with Scott about that coming up in a little bit. It is supposed to be, I think, a pretty nice Thursday, maybe a little cloudy this afternoon, but no rain in the forecast here. You'll listen to Kevin Aquari on 93.5, 107.5.
on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Play the clip, Mark Dykton. Come on.
Don't look now, but here come the Red Legs.
11 in a row. The drama continues with them. Yesterday, they were down 3-0. They score 5 unanswered the rest of the way. A 2-run shot in the 8th from Jake Fairley. That is an 11 in a row. They've got a day off. What do we go back to the Eisenhower administration, Jake, for the last time the franchise has won 11?
1957. Last time the franchise won 11 in a row. So uncharted territory, at least in most of our lifetimes. Not all. Most of our lifetimes for the Cincinnati Reds. Yesterday, also in Major League Baseball, Giants doubling up the Padres 4-2. It was Dodgers 2-0 over the Angels. Rangers 6-3 over the White Sox. Twins over the Red Sox. Guardians over Kevin's Athletics. Yankees over the Mariners. Nationals blanked the Cardinals. Cute fella on the short end. They lost. Mark's pumping his fist. 7-2 the Rays over the cute fella. And the Diamondbacks beat the Brewers 5-1. That helps the Reds. That's fine. College baseball. College World Series tonight. It will be Wake Forest and it will be Louisiana State playing for the right to advance and face Florida in the, is it best of 3?
Best of 3, correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So game 3 tonight.
Yeah, and again, a great pitching matchup. Supposedly 2 top 15 picks going for LSU in Wake Forest. Outside of the NBA draft, you've got the Fever in Seattle tonight. They start a 4-game Western trip. And then obviously with the draft, with yesterday's news of the Pacers trading with Denver, they've gone from 5 selections to 4 in this year's draft. So right now they will be picking 7th and 26th in round 1. Again, round 1, 5 minutes long. Glorious, the NBA draft just does 5 minutes for their picks. Then in round 2, those selections are 2 minutes long, even better. They have picks number 40 from Denver and then number 55. We mentioned this in the opening segment, the trade yesterday for a 2024 first rounder from Denver is, I guess, matters about how 4 teams finish next season. In all likelihood, they will be picking, I would say, somewhere in the early 20s. Early to mid-20s.
I have a game, an NBA draft game I'd like to create.
Oh.
Should we let Rakestraw in on this too? So it'd be 4 of us?
Sure. Any tease with it, or does this need to be flushed out during the break?
It's kind of like a drinking game. And there's no way to actually monitor it. So like most of our games, there's no actual like scoring to it.
Oh, okay. Just, but it's integrity.
Correct, but it's a fun game to play.
We'll do that next. Greg Rakestraw joins us on the other side. Kevin Aquara here, 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
So here is my NBA draft lottery game that we're going to play. Not really, but for fun, theoretically. You ready?
Yeah.
We're going to have our own draft. Now, we can't do this based on pick number 1 because you can kind of, it's obvious what words may be used. So if we were to just pick a number randomly, well, for that matter, we could say for the Pacers draft pick, whoever the Pacers take at 7, assuming they stay at 7, if you had to, if you were in Vegas and you could put down on, this was a wagering game, you've got to pick or buy one of these adjectives, and whichever one is the first that is used on draft night by the panel of 16 analysts that are on the stage, you win the $1 million. And your choices are long, upside, quickness, raw, wingspan, high motor, basketball IQ. Which one is the one that will be first used in describing the Pacers pick, and which one is most used over the course of the first round?
Oh, I would say for the Pacers pick, long and wingspan. Because if it's Jarris Walker or Taylor Hendricks, both of those dudes have wingspans over 7 feet. So I would venture to guess and slash hope that would be the first one used. In general, it's got to be upside, right? Right?
I'm going...
I feel like that's what you get after you get out of like the top 10. You're like, oh, he's got upside.
Oh, but I still feel like in the top 10 you get it. I mean, the two Thompsons didn't play college basketball. Obviously Wembanyama's an international prospect. Scoot Henderson didn't,
I feel like long. Every player's long. Well, he's long. He's got a high. Of course, if the thing is, long is kind of a parlay because if you're going with long, then you usually get wingspan that is right around with it, right?
I always am curious why age is such a huge. Like people act like Trace Jackson Davis and Chris Murray are 45 years old entering this draft. Did we have the age debate with Will Levis and Anthony Richardson?
It was very, very static, yeah, for a second.
To the degree that we would have it if we were debating a 20 versus 24-year-old in the NBA. Isn't the shelf life in the NBA a lot longer than it is in the NFL?
Yeah, that's fair. I think because part of the NBA draft is it's like playing the stock market. You're buying future stocks, basically. And with it, the older a player is, the closer it feels like they are to what you're going to get out of it. You're already getting the sample size. And I think teams like to buy the intrigue of somebody of what are they going to be in 3 to 5 years. They're still growing into it. Everybody wants to hit, right? Everybody wants to find their Giannis, their Jokic. A guy that like, oh man, look how smart they were.
You want to ask Rake about your game here?
Greg Rexdahl joins us now on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Greg, if you were to pick one of these two phrases, the phrase that will be used the first to describe the Pacers pick, and then B, the one that will be used the most in tonight's first round television coverage. Your options are long, upside, quickness, raw, wingspan, high motor, high basketball IQ. Which one of those gets uttered the most tonight?
I would say long. Did you throw athletic in there?
Ooh, athletic's a good one. Yep.
Clearly upside because you're drafting some freshman or international players. But for the Pacers, I would say long and defender would be what gets used the most at pick number 7.
That's what Kevin's going with. Okay.
Rake, are we still in that streak of an Indiana high school prospect going in round 1? I kind of forget if that streak is still alive.
Yeah, I'm spacing on that one too. We have somebody taken in the first round last year as well. Well, I guess Laravia, right?
Well, and Jaden Ivey.
Yep. Correct.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that. I felt like in the last 2 to 3 years, maybe the streak stopped, but I wasn't 100% positive. on that. The other thing I was going to ask you in regards to that, the Indiana high school prospect that averaged the most points in the NBA last season was Desmond Bain. What do you remember about Desmond Bain in high school?
That Desmond was a heck of a player at Tiny Seton Catholic. People knew that he was a Division I level kid. I don't think anybody thought he was going to be an NBA player.
He's a max NBA player now.
He's getting that direction. I mean, the numbers he's putting up is something impressive. But he was an Indiana All-Star level kid, and he was a kid that kind of took forever to figure out where he's going to go to college because he kind of waiting for the proper opportunity. Late in the game, in comes TCU. Clearly, everything worked out for him there. But being an all-star level player from a high school that had less than 100 kids, that's immediately what comes to mind.
Greg Rakestraw is our guest at Payless Liquors Hotline. Greg, let's start with the Pacers in the draft tonight before we get to other things. I personally feel like, and I know that defensively that's what's going to intrigue them, and that's what theoretically they're going after with pick number 7 is I think Walker of Houston's probably the safest bet. Whitmore from Villanova. Do you see any chance that they go anything away from defensive forward?
No, and just because they've got they've got so many pieces that are similar. With Matherin, with Neesmith, they're kind of overloaded the point guard position with Tyrese, with Nemhard, with TJ. The fact that I can just spit out 5 players that can play kind of the 1, 2, or the 3, and you don't have that same thing at the 4. You tried Jalen Smith there last year, didn't really work. You're thinking about him or Jackson as your backup and not the 4. You've got a glaring need at the 4. Now the 4 again is a lot different than what it was, just a few years ago. We're not talking about Dale Davis, lining up next to, Miles Turner here. But again, knowing that the need is pretty easy to see, I think it's that type of player they are going with. And again, I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you that I can, spit out so many facts about Walker, Whitmore, Hendricks, etc. I really think it comes down to, I think if Walker's available at 7, I think that's the guy to go with.
Greg Rakestraw, IFC Sports Network, with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Rake, a guy that will certainly, by all accounts, continue whatever Indiana high school streak there is in a couple of years, would be Flory Badunga out of Kokomo. I was reading something, I think Kyle Bednarip wrote this from over the weekend. Flory Badunga is going to play high school soccer this year for Kokomo. Is that correct?
I heard that yesterday as well. I was having a conversation with one of my Kokomo buddies, and yes, Flory's I'm sure that played the sport growing up.
Is this a goalie?
That's what George Hill does. I think Flory's going to be a field player.
Yeah, somebody sent me a picture of him playing in the field for Kokomo.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is incredible. I mean, when you think about this day and age in high school athletics and the specialization of it, and I mean, hell, if you're Flory Badunga, nowadays 70-80% of those guys go and play at some sort of prep school or academy or whatever, overtime elite, and now this dude is going to be playing soccer in the NCC conference.
Not bad, right? I think what it is too is that there are, and maybe this happens more in football, but there are guys that will be football players, but also baseball or basketball players as well as football that will play through their junior year. By the time they get to their senior year, like, hey, I'm going to focus on football. I'm going to maybe even graduate a semester early. So many kids that are top-end basketball players, again, occasionally you get a kid that's really good at football or a baseball player out of that group, but you don't normally there are kids that are specialized over the years. Flory is so good in terms of where his recruiting level is. He's probably got work still to improve his offensive game. But he's so good, it's not like a school's going to say, hey, we're not going to recruit you if you play soccer. We're worried about you damaging your stock. No, he's like so elite nationally, like, top 5 to 10 player in the nation. Nobody's going to tell him no. No Michigan, Duke, Purdue, Indiana, etc. Nobody's going to say, hey, we don't think you should be playing soccer this year. That's how good of a player he is. So I think it's great that he's going out and doing something like that.
In terms of his, and Greg, it's not like any of us necessarily, quote unquote, know, right? But from what you hear in terms of his recruitment, initially I think a lot of people thought Cincinnati because he has like a familial tie with the group, with the folks that are why he's in Kokomo or here, as I understand it. Purdue is apparently been, pretty consistent with him. But he went to Duke yesterday. He's visited Indiana now. He's got literally his pick of the crop. Is there any school that appears to be or is thought to be a leader for him, or is it wide open?
Again, there's the family tie to Cincinnati. Michigan, I think there was a feel of a good fit there, but I truly think it's wide open. And again, he is such a special talent in terms of the things that he does exceptionally well, that he has his pick. And it's truly any school in the country would say, we've got a spot for you. And so I don't think there's a leader in the clubhouse right now. I think it truly is, open for where he wants to go, because I think the possibilities are limitless for that kid.
Rick, it's always a little bit of everything whenever you hop on with us, so I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think given your soccer background, you'll have something on this. I saw that the U.S. women's national team announced their roster for the World Cup upcoming here in Australia and New Zealand. I think it starts late next month. They're going for a three-peat, which has never been done, and I saw that Dennis Rodman's daughter is on the team.
That is Trinity, correct. And again, Dennis was not an active participant in her life growing up, but she is one of 14 first-time World Cup participants for the U.S. women's team.
Is she a starter?
She could be. I mean, thing is, on a World Cup roster, you're taking 23,
right?
And so you're not, other than the backup goalkeeper or two that usually don't play, everybody else is usually going to see some time. And so, she's one of the better players in the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League. So she's a very talented player. And so I think she's going to start. And if not, and she's going to see some minutes at some point in time. It's kind of the way that things shape up. So our team is the two-time defending champs. I'm not sure we're the best. I mean, we're going to be one of the favorites. We always are. But again, I think the world is starting to catch up with us a little bit more, and we are kind of going through this changeover period where there are several new faces that are in the roster, and there's also been 3 or 4 injuries that have happened to players that would have been playing. The latest one being Becky Sauerbrunn, who would be the team captain, that can't go because of an injury. So we're always a threat to win it. I don't think that we are I wouldn't say we were the slam dunk favorite the last couple of times, but we were the favorite. I think we're one of a few favorites this time around.
Jake, you care to guess the 3 other countries in our group?
Now, this is
the Women's World Cup coming up late next month.
Right, but the group is not necessarily like regionalized of the world.
No,
right?
2 from Europe and 1 non-European country.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't know this. Croatia, one, right? Denmark.
Okay.
And then, really a sleeper in this whole thing, Guyana.
I feel like we could be guessing for an hour for the 4th country. Netherlands and Portugal would be the 2 European countries. Okay. The 4th country, Vietnam.
Really?
Rick, I was shocked to see that.
It's part of the growth of the game. The field has expanded over the course of the last couple of World Cups. And so you get some more unique nations that qualify. I think we put it on Thailand like 11-0 or 13-0.
I forgot about that.
In the last World Cup, and we were, deemed to be, poor sports because we, ran it up a little bit. I don't know about the strength of this Vietnamese women's team, but I would be thinking that maybe a similar result could be in order in the group stage opener for Team USA on July 21st.
July 21st. By the way, Vietnam is supposedly, from everything I've ever read, absolutely gorgeous. Like
really?
Literally, yeah, one of the most.
Yeah.
Just a beautiful country. Greg, appreciate it. Enjoy the hopefully the dry weather today, and always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
See you guys.
Greg Rakestraw on the Payless Sugars Hotline. Scott Agnes coming up in an hour. 8 o'clock hour, more on the draft. And I have a question for you guys that falls under the category of am I being a jerk? We'll put it that way. Am I being judgmental? How's that?
Wow.
Am I being judgmental? I have a question for you guys about that.
No bias from Mark and I's answer on
the 8
that.
o'clock hour.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
I'm going to cruise through a bunch of the latest mock drafts to see kind of what the consensus is for where the Pacers are going at 7. I think it's probably Walker from Houston seems to be the consensus. We'll get into that in just a minute. I got a question for you guys. I need you to tell me if I'm being too judgmental. Do you find me to be a judgmental person?
If I was writing like a positive press release on you, I'd probably use a different word. But, we could find a synonym that maybe sounds a little bit better. So, my buddy Tony, bingo card, he's my Clemson buddy down Tony
in South
Katz?
Carolina. Not Tony Katz. I'm not that he's not a buddy, but different Tony. So, my buddy Tony in Clemson, who I love like a brother, and his wife Diana, their son, I love them. Fabulous people. But they are... And you guys have children, I do not, so I'm going to defer to you guys here. They're all in on the Disney stuff. They go to the Disney cruises. They go to Disneyland on the regular. Of course, I don't think it's very far from where they live in South Carolina to Orlando. It's probably a short flight or not, maybe even like an afternoon's worth of driving. I don't know, but or like a long day drive. But they go, literally like 4 or 5 times a year, they're doing Disney-related stuff. Now, the Disney thing is like that, right? Like, people get in on the Disney thing, and they're all in, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's cool. So, a couple of days ago, I noticed on social media, they're posting that they're getting ready for, the trip of a lifetime to Paris. And I'm like, oh, gosh. And I hate is the wrong word. I try not to be that guy of like, you're going to such and such, you got to do this, you got to do that. It's like, whatever. There's a restaurant you got to try. Yeah, there's 50,000 restaurants in Paris. I'm glad that you enjoyed that one while you were there, etc. So I try not to be that guy, but I simply texted Tony and said, oh my gosh, Paris was amazing when I was there. The one thing that I most enjoyed that we did was a bike tour of the city at night. It was just fabulous. The weather was perfect. But, have a great time, whatever. So I'm looking on social media this morning as I'm getting ready because, of course, they're like 6 hours ahead, right? So they're already off running their day. So they landed, and then yesterday they did like the Eiffel Tower and the Eiffel Tower was the one thing that they did. And I'm sure they're jet lagged or whatever else. And then today there's the video or the picture of them, and they're on the train, and they're going to Disneyland Paris.
Yeah.
Now,
checks out.
Okay, my only thing is, and this is where I'm wanting to know if I'm just a judgmental 50-year-old with no kids. It seems to me, I'm like, if you're going to go all the way across the ocean to a different country, to a city like Paris that has the greatest art museum in the world and just fabulous neighborhoods and history and everything else. Like, it seems odd to me to go do something that is just the same version of what you have in Orlando, but the mouse is now French. Am I off base here?
Well, you could go to cemeteries in different cities. You could go to cemeteries anywhere.
True, but different, because the cemetery that I would go to in Paris, I am seeing different people and different architecture and whatever else than I would see in, like, Chicago.
If you go to a theme park, though, like if you go to, like, Holiday World here, or you go to Six Flags Great America in Gurnee, Illinois, okay, there's a carousel here.
But I don't know, but wouldn't the Disneyland Paris be very similar to Disney World in Orlando?
They have different
I guess
things.
that's why you go, to see if it is the same.
You want to compare
Basically,
and contrast.
and I'd be curious to know how old the kids are. It's not like they can really do any activities, I'd assume, without the kid. Yeah, let's just leave them at the hotel and get a babysitter. I would assume your activities have got to be kid-centric.
Hey, kids, you want to look at some art?
I think their son...
Bike tours at night probably isn't going to fit the mold for that.
Oh, there were a bunch of... The bike tour, let me rephrase that. The bike tour, which, by the way, if anybody's listening, I will be that guy when I say this. If you go to Paris or Barcelona, because I did them both, Fat Tire is the name of the company, and they do like English-speaking bike tours. There were a lot of kids on it because there were a lot of the group's like 15, and we had a family from Indianapolis actually in our group. Their son, I think, is 12. I think he's 12 years old. So the bike tour is like from 5 p.m. to 7:30. It's not like it's like in the middle of the night.
Fat Tire, also a solid beer, by the way.
It is a solid beer.
Yeah, I just can't see the 12-year-old loving art museum tours, but that's me.
Okay.
It's the old saying of when you take the kids on vacation, you as parents, you then need a vacation for yourself. It's not truly a vacation. Mark can probably speak to that a little bit better, and certainly just spend time on
So
one.
if you went to Paris with your 12-year-old, you wouldn't take them to see the Mona Lisa?
I would have to think of what I was like at 12. I mean, maybe that's a stop at some point, and I don't know. Maybe that will be a stop for them. Maybe night one is just cross off the old Disneyland Paris thing.
Definitely would take them to the Eiffel Tower. Mona Lisa, I don't know how much interest they would have at 12 years old.
Well, didn't your parents take you to places when you were 12 that you didn't have interest in at the time? I mean,
they brought me to on a wine tour, and then
I went on
drink or anything.
In 8th grade, we went on a trip to Washington, D.C. as a school group, and we went to like the Smithsonian and saw the Hope Diamond. And I don't know at the time how much it meant to me, but I went through the White House. I got stopped by Secret Service in the White House, by the way.
Oh, that's a shock.
Yeah.
Sir, put that pencil back. Yeah.
So you're saying that I'm being the grumpy old guy by...
I got no issue with the stop at Disneyland Paris.
Yeah.
Well, clearly Disney means a lot to the family, and want to experience it, and people go to Disneyland versus Disney World. I got no issue with it.
Your kids are only little for so long, so if they want to do Disneyland in Paris and you have that ability to do that, by all means.
Okay, what about this? What about if you went to... Is it unusual if you flew to Paris strictly to go to the Disneyland Paris and then come back?
Yeah, I would think you'd want to go see more things in Paris than just that.
But again, that's their choice. If that's what they want to do with their money and time, by all means, do what makes you happy.
Okay, fair enough. Athletic says that at 40, the Pacers are going to take Trace Jackson Davis. That's a mock draft. If you're just joining us, the Pacers yesterday making a trade. They have sent the 29th and 32nd pick to Denver for Denver's 40th pick this year, and then a first-rounder next year. And, Kevin, that first-rounder is conditional upon, 9 different things, right?
Yeah, and it's probably worth explaining again. So, yes, they are getting a first-rounder from Denver, but it depends on Houston, Utah, the Clippers, and Oklahoma City. I think the best way to explain this is go off last year's record. And if you look at those 4 teams, the Pacers will be acquiring the worst pick, the one closest around 2 of those 4 teams. So if you look at last year, Houston right now, 4th pick, Utah, 9th, Oklahoma City, 12th, and the Clippers, 20th. So the Clippers have the worst of those 4. So the Pacers, if the exact same records hold for those 4 teams next year, they would acquire the 20th overall pick there in round 1. So again, I'm a fan of this move. I think, for people that were listening yesterday, you heard me talk about move some of these late first rounders for a future first rounder. You got way too much of a logjam this year with 12 guys under contract on your roster. You don't have room for all these guaranteed contracts or the 5 picks. And it continues to kind of help you out moving forward if and when that time occurs as a franchise of, oh, wow, here we are in January. Here we are in early February. We're the 4th seed. We feel like we're a piece away. Boom. Let's trade the first-round pick and do what Cleveland did with you to get Karis LeVert or Boston did with you to get Malcolm Brogdon. At some point, you would like to think the Pacers will be in a different mindset than they're in right now. Because right now, and very understandably, it's been collect as many draft picks as possible. Now they've reached a point where that's not of extreme importance. I think they're going to get to a point where, okay, let's have some flexibility with turning those draft picks into players. So I am a big fan of what they did yesterday.
I think it's funny when you have a first-round pick like Indiana has acquired for next year that's been traded 4 times.
No, it's so confusing.
It's like a hot potato pick. Here's a first-round pick that no one seems to want. It's
so confusing.
Well, then figuring out it's top 10 protected.
I know.
Lottery.
Top 4 protected. Yeah.
By the way, for those that don't know, protected means the following. I mean, I assume most people know this, but if you're listening and you're not overall dialed in or paid that close attention, a protected pick, you will hear, for example, and it's not necessarily applicable in this case, but for example, the Pacers had a pick last year. They had Cleveland's first rounder that was lottery protected, meaning that if Cleveland got into the lottery, they maintain that pick. You only get the pick if Cleveland had not been in the lottery. That pick that Indiana got when it originally was Houston's pick, was called top 4 protected, meaning that if Houston had ended up with a top 4 pick, they hold on to that. They don't have to trade it away. It then defers to another year. It does get pretty confusing, admittedly.
When you look at the two guys that I've mentioned the most over the last month or so, again, I would be totally content if the Pacers ended up with Jarris Walker or Taylor Hendricks tonight. They are similar in some ways, and they are really different in other ways. I think most people want Walker ahead of Hendricks. I don't know if that has to do with maybe just more prominence with Walker being a Houston guy. They obviously were a 1 seed. Really hyped freshman entering Kelvin Sampson's program. The differences. Jarris Walker, very physically imposing. I mean, you look at him and you think that dude is 19. He's 6'8", 230, 240, just a grown man. Long wingspan. I think the major pros to him are a versatile defender, can really rebound it. If you look at the NCAA tournament, he had some big games, rebound and blocking shot-wise, against Miami, against Auburn. The question, is that jump shot consistent enough? I think he was 34% from 3. And so offensively, I think people look at him and think he's a little bit more of a field player. Kind of moves the ball, not some dead-eye shooter. How high is that ceiling on the offensive end of the floor? Whereas Hendricks, body type-wise, I think is much just like lankier. I've seen some people compare him to a poor man's Jaren Jackson Jr., so not as thick. I mean, he's not skinny by any means, but not as thick as Walker. Again, another big wingspan. Probably the biggest pro to him is he is a much more accomplished shooter. He shot at 40% from 3 last year. Good rim protector, probably more of a rim protector than a guy like Walker. But again, still a versatile defender, maybe not quite the rebounder that Jarris Walker was at Houston. And I think there are some questions about, is he a playmaker for you on the offensive end of the floor? Or is he just a spot-up shooter? So to me, it's kind of the flavor of what you want if both are there, which I think there are questions about both of them being there on the board. But again, I am a fan of either of those selections at number 7.
Taking a look at some of the mock drafts, which I always say are good to mock, but they give you an idea, right? Yahoo, Jarris Walker. They have him going to Indiana at 7, then with the other picks, Maxwell Lewis and Jalen Wilson, the guard out of Kansas. Bleacher Report, Hendricks, along with Jet Howard and G.G. Jackson.
G.G. Jackson, I think he's the youngest dude in the draft.
Yeah, he's a South Carolina, right? Mm-hmm. Shooting guard?
Yeah.
SB Nation, Jarris Walker, James, I'm hoping I'm saying this correctly, Najee, who is a center out of Barcelona, and then with the 40th pick, Trace Jackson Davis to Indiana. And DraftKings, Cam Whitmore, 7th overall. And then the kid with the 2nd pick, the 26th pick, Olivier Maxence Prosser out of Marquette. They don't go into the 2nd round, so it doesn't say who they think the Pacers would take 40th. I think there are those that feel like if the Pacers took Trace Jackson Davis with the 40th pick, that it would be, you're going to get those people that are like, well, they're trying to sell tickets, like when they drafted Damon Bailey in 94, trying to sell tickets. I think in the case of Trace Jackson Davis, they do think that he can do some things, honestly. So you don't think he'd be on the 2-way deal? You don't think he'd be a little Mad Ant action with that 2nd round pick? I mean, that if they drafted him there, probably, yeah, that's possible. But again, I'm going to go back to what I was told about Trace Jackson Davis throughout his workouts and tryouts and the quote unquote the process, and that is he does what he does very well, which is rim protect and rebound, and he is starting to show he can do other areas better than what he has shown. If there's any part of Trace Jackson Davis is like, I don't want the Pacers to draft me. Yes. Having nothing to do. I mean, he's not going to say that now. Sure, and he'll be grateful for the opportunity, but God, there's got to be an element of like, do I really want to constantly answer Dale Davis questions and everyone's going to notice me? And here's all over the other town. And expectations, I think, naturally will just be higher. In addition to that, he if when you get out of college, one of the things to me about college that was exciting when I was in college that I can still kind of feel or capture is I remember being totally intrigued and fascinated by the prospect of where I might end up. Where am I going to end up living? Where am I going to get a job? Now, obviously, and it wasn't necessarily by design. I ended up, I didn't spring very far, obviously. But I think to an extent, a guy like Trace Jackson Davis, who played at Center Grove, played at Indiana, to your point, Dale Davis's son, there has to be an element of the world is now my oyster. And, I want to go, am I going to be living in Salt Lake City or Phoenix or Orlando or New Orleans? I think there would be an element of, and I love, like I said, you cut me, I bleed the torch, right? I love Indiana and I love Indianapolis, but I think at that age there would be an element of, I'm excited to be able to go see the world. And you can still do that, I get it, but
I would just think it'd be overwhelming.
Totally. And in addition to that, Kevin, let's face it, next year, if Indiana University, if Mike Woodson next year has a disappointing year or Indiana is struggling, or even if they're playing really well, if Trace Jackson Davis is playing for the Pacers, literally after every other practice in media availability, people are going to be wanting to talk to Trace Jackson Davis about so what do you think of Indiana's struggles? And I'm sure he's yeah, man, I played there for 4 years. I had a great time. I'm trying to do my own thing. Whereas if he is playing for the Dallas Mavericks, nobody's going to ask about Indiana, right?
Yeah, if he gets drafted by the Suns, Frank Vogel's not answering questions about Trace's playing time.
Correct.
If he gets drafted by the Pacers, Rick Carlisle's answering questions about Trace Jackson Davis's playing time.
Correct.
Again, 7 o'clock, our coverage. 8 o'clock, the draft begins. 5 minutes for each pick in round 1. 2 minutes for each pick in round 2. The Pacers, 7, 26, 40, and 55. Those are their selections after yesterday's trade. Again, they got a first-rounder coming next year in yesterday's trade. If you look at the Vegas odds right now, just pulled up the old betting app, plus 100 for Jarris Walker at number 7 overall. Taylor Hendricks out of Central Florida, plus 250 on that. And
by the way, what are the odds? If you go to any of the apps, are they even taking wagers on who's going to go first overall?
I thought I saw yesterday if you bet $24 on Wembanyama to go number 1 overall, you got a penny.
Are you serious?
I believe that was correct. So $24 bet for $24.01.
You're not kidding, man. Look at this.
Yeah, if I put $20 down right now, I get 4 cents.
Oh, wow. Good return on your investment there, Mark.
Minus 50,000.
I mean, you might as well.
It seems like Brandon Miller's now the favorite.
Scoot Henderson's still the favorite.
Really? I thought I saw Brandon Miller.
I'm sorry, that's for number 1 overall. Yeah, Brandon Miller's the favorite at number 2.
Well, Scoot's not the favorite for 1 overall.
No. Wembanyama is, but Scoot is still listed as the second favorite for number 1 overall.
But number 2 overall is Brandon Miller. Correct. To Charlotte.
Minus 650.
Obviously Cam Whitmore, the Thompson brothers, those are a couple of names that you'd throw in there. With Whitmore, I think there's a lot of talent. To me, it's just he's too similar to Benedict Mathurin. And trust me, I know there's a section of the fan base that says, screw the idea of best fit. You need to continue to take best player available. You're not going to be drafting in the top 10, you would hope, for the next decade. You need to take the biggest swings possible considering where you're at in this draft. I hear people on that. I still think it's best fit. And the defense is just so poor right now. It's so poor. And that's the route that you have to take. And obviously another thing over the next 12 hours, continue to monitor trade talks. Because I'd be willing to bet the Pacers are one of the more active teams right now, fielding calls and making calls, given everything they have.
Now, wait a minute. If you put down $10 for Brandon Miller to go number 1 overall, you win $1,000 if he was. Isn't that worth? What if on the way there Victor Wembanyama decides, you know what, I saw Pee Wee's Big Adventure and I don't like the Alamo, so I'm not gonna play there. I'm holding out.
So you think the odds should be greater or smaller?
No, I'm saying isn't it worth throw $1 down to win $100? Okay, why not?
Yeah, it just seems like you're flushing $1.
That's probably where you need to call 1-800-9 with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably fair.
Scott Atkins going to join us coming out at the top of the hour. Not only chat with him about tonight's draft, but again, a big announcement yesterday in regards to the All-Star game. There will be some activities over at Lucas Oil Stadium. More people in the building, less money for tickets. To me, it seems to be a win for the Saturday night of All-Star weekend coming up in February. That would be the dunk contest, the three-point contest, and the skills competition. So we'll talk with Scott more about that coming up around 9. Let's hit a morning check down.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Don't look now, but here come the Redlegs.
Yeah, baby, 11 in a row for the Redlegs. The Big Red Machine did not accomplish that. You've got to go back to, is it 57 or 67?
57.
57 for the last time the Reds have won 11 in a row. In true Reds fashion, yesterday was not some walk in the park by any means. They got down 3-0. It was 3-3 in the 8th. Jake Fairley hit a 2-run shot. They win the day game. They complete yet another sweep. I think that's 3 in a row on that front. They've got a well-deserved day off there, as they are now 40-35 on the year and leading the AFC South of divisions, the NL Central.
Elsewhere in Major League Baseball yesterday, Orioles on the short end. Rays beat them 7-2. It was the Cubs 8-3 over the Pirates, Diamondbacks 5-1 over the Brewers, and the Nationals beating the Cardinals 3-0.
Mark, I feel like the Cubs are playing much better baseball here.
They swept the Pirates for the second time in a row, and they took a 2 out of 3 against the Orioles. So, yeah, doing well.
2 out of 3 is what you've got to win to advance in the College World Series. Tonight, it is a winner-take-all to advance. Wake Forest and Louisiana State. Florida awaits Florida yesterday, eliminating Texas Christian. But again, kudos to TCU for the way they handled the Indiana State situation.
Outstanding in the money they raised for Special Olympics. Yeah, tonight supposedly is a great pitching matchup. LSU won last night to extend it to tonight. And then either them or Wake Forest will advance to take on Florida. I guess top 15 MLB prospects on the mound for Wake Forest tonight and LSU. Outside of the NBA draft, the other thing from a local standpoint tonight will be the Fever. They are in action out west. They've got Seattle coming up at 10 o'clock. I believe that's available on Prime Video. If you're by that point, we'll be, I don't know if we'll be into the second round, but we'll certainly be a little bit later into the first round here with the NBA draft.
By the way, somebody just sent me their little wager ticket. They bet $59.05 on Victor Wembanyama going number 1 overall. They will win 29 cents.
Oh, boy, that's a little risky.
Take the wife and kids out to dinner?
Hell yeah. They could go to...
Take them to Paris Disneyland.
That's right.
Pacini's maybe after the commercial. That I think sounds unbelievable.
Oh, it's a great jingle.
Pizza,
You don't forget it, do you? You don't forget it. That's the point. You know what I always say during the Super Bowl commercials? The next day, people are like, oh, the best Super Bowl commercial by far was the one where the guy da-da-da. And you're like, what was the product for? Oh, I can't remember, but it was hilarious. It was so awesome. But what was it? What were they advertising? I don't remember, but it was so cool. Okay, well, then that's the worst commercial ever made.
It's like the cheesier, the more annoying, the better.
Yeah.
At least from a brand standpoint. On the other side, we've got an official date for that Purdue-Alabama game in Canada. We'll talk about that and continue to preview tonight's NBA draft. Kevin Aquari here on a Thursday.
An inquiry on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Jake, yesterday Purdue announced the date for their matchup with Alabama coming up in Toronto this year. It'll be December 9th. So Zach Edey, obviously a chance to play in his home country. This Purdue non-conference schedule this year. They are in the Maui tournament. And listen to the Maui field. Gonzaga, Kansas, Marquette, Purdue, Syracuse, Tennessee, UCLA, Chaminade. Weren't those first 7 teams I listed, weren't they all like top, I mean, I guess outside of Syracuse, like top 3 seeds last year?
Yeah.
So that's the Maui.
I mean,
so you'll get 3 games there. And then they've got Alabama on December 9th in Toronto. The following Saturday, we saw the announcement, I think it was last week, of them playing Arizona here in Indy at what is that new Hoosier Classic. Used to be the Crossroads Classic. Purdue has upgraded from Davidson to Arizona. That Davidson game was kind of a battle last year. That's a really good, strong non-conference schedule. It kind of got me thinking back to, I remember we had Dane Fife on, I think it was right after Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dickinson, and he was chatting a little bit about why at Michigan State they seem to have so much success in the tournament. They obviously had good regular season success as well, but the tournament, of course, has been where Tom Izzo has really thrived. And I remember Dane telling us how Izzo's goal in the non-conference schedule was to play a team from every major conference. So you kind of got a feel of, okay, this is what the
Different
ACC
style
is
play,
like.
yeah.
This is what the Big 12's like. You look at Purdue's schedule this year, it's got a lot of that in Alabama and Arizona, of course. And then, just by luck of the draw, luck of the bracket, you're going to play 3 teams that are in various parts of the country, various conferences coming up in the Maui as well. So, again, I don't know if that all of a sudden, that means they're going to beat the mid-major come in March. I don't know, but it certainly is a challenging and notable non-conference schedule.
The one thing I've always felt, I've said this before, if I was the head of a college basketball program, Indiana, Purdue, whatever it might be, I would just pick probably 1 or 2 middle tier of Power 5 conference schools and do a home and home with them each year. Give me a conference, top of your head, Kevin.
The Big East.
The Big East. So, when you think of I'm trying to think, who would be like just a mid-tier team in the Big East? Like a solid team, but
Providence.
Yeah, Providence. Perfect. Hey, let's do a home and home with Providence. Let's do a home and home with Oklahoma State. With, even for that matter, Arizona State. Whatever. Just to get. Did you laugh there, Mike?
No, you said Arizona State. I'd sign up for that.
Would you get lost with the extracurriculars while you're in?
I'd be riding the bench, but I'd have something to
Have
look
we checked
at.
on the Dikton curfew here?
That's right. But you get what I'm saying, though, right?
Yeah.
Just to me, that just adds more value. I get it. You want to be able to also play, your Hoosier Classics to be able to get some of further down your bench, some minutes and rep and build some depth. I get that. But I just think there's a lot of value in those games, and you don't necessarily, you shouldn't have to go play in tournaments in order to acquire them.
I am a fan of the home floor, home and homes. Like, I love that Indiana and Kansas did what they did last year, and now it's going to be in Assembly Hall this year. Like, that to me is awesome. Indiana's non-conference, they obviously have that Kansas game at Assembly Hall. They will play Auburn in Atlanta. I mean, Georgia has turned into a bit of a hotbed for Mike Woodson from a recruiting standpoint. So they're going to play Auburn, Bruce Pearl down there. Their Indy game, remember last year they played, I think it was Miami, Ohio, they played at Bankers Life. They're going to play Harvard this year at Bankers Life. And then they've got a neutral site, I guess it's a tournament. It's a 4-team deal. Louisville, Texas, UConn. Those are the 3 other teams. Insert your jokes about how bad Louisville was at basketball last season. I wouldn't mind the Pacers getting that Andre Jackson from UConn tonight. Maybe at 26.
I'll tell you, the kid
He can't shoot, but he can make a whole lot of winning plays.
The kid from Utah, from UConn, that I'm intrigued by in this draft is the Hawkins kid.
Yeah, Jordan Hawkins, yeah. He's probably,
I mean,
late lottery?
Yeah, probably mid-teens, right? I mean, but his ability to shoot just off the curl, and I mean, he has – this is probably a stretch. At his, ceiling, if you will, he has like Reggie Miller / Klay Thompson look about him. I'm not saying he's that level player, but
that dude would be sprinting off screens, and I'd be like, "Gosh, he looks out of control." And then boom, all of a sudden he catches it. His form was beautiful,
and he's a lightning in a bottle guy, right?
Yeah.
Well, he gets hot, and it's like, holy cow!
Without a doubt. Greg points out, Purdue's non-conference last year. Yes, West Virginia, Duke, Gonzaga, Florida State, and Marquette. Yeah, Purdue is, I think, pretty annually played a good non-conference schedule. You continue to challenge yourself against those teams, and I've said this numerous times about Purdue. Certainly, you need some tweaks roster-wise, and we'll see an injection of a Miles Colvin. What does he do? He's on the U19 U.S. team. Clearly, they think very highly of him and his athleticism, and that will be something that I think will be welcome at Purdue, even though at times probably with Heritage Christian, you were like, oh, man, are they not winning a little bit more? Darts at the dartboard. I think if you continue to challenge yourself in the non-conference, tweak some things, particularly athletically with your roster, I think eventually it's going to fall your way and you're going to make a run.
By the way, in terms of the NBA draft, Kevin, if you were a GM, what's the magic line of where you transition from honed in on player versus flyer? Like if you're going to take a flyer on a guy, if you're going to say like this has boom or bust potential, what's the you need to be beyond what pick in the draft where you then feel like, okay, I'm not bypassing on a sure thing now.
Yeah, that's a great question. Boy, I think so much of it depends on where you're at as a franchise and as an organization. Like, do you think that you're just a piece away? Do you view yourself in the light of, hey, we've got a log jam here and we feel really good? I don't think a rookie's going to impact our group. We're willing to take a bit of a flyer. That's a good question. I don't know if there's like a specific kind of threshold of a number-wise. This obviously looks idiotic looking back on it, but when the Pacers drafted Goga, there was a part of me that's like, oh, I understand what the Pacers are thinking here. Now, they drafted Goga and then didn't move Sabonis or Turner for a couple of years, and it's like, okay, you're never going to get a true evaluation on Goga. Like, you have all these centers, and what are you thinking here? Like, at some point, if you're going to make a selection like that, you've got to properly evaluate him. And honestly, and we don't need to go down this path, if you look at when Goga has gotten kind of a small run in the NBA, there's been some moments where it's like, oh, wow, he's averaging like 14 and 8 in 20 minutes of action. Where I thought the Goga pick was at least interesting, it was at a time where Giannis and Jokic, and I guess to a degree Embiid, were all starting to emerge as like, oh, wow, these are the best players in the NBA right now. And the international angle, Jake, I think is one that teams are going to continue to try and fall in love with, particularly smaller market teams. Because what have we seen? Embiid, been a Sixer the whole time. Giannis, been a Buck the whole time. Jokic, been a Nugget the whole time. I think you have less volatility with the international players wanting to move.
Correct, because they were not reared in the AAU. Right. And that's...
Or even, I think you throw AAU, I think you throw in... There is that element, too, of the Team USA stuff. Hey, I played with these dudes on the U17, U19 team. I want to team up with them.
Kevin, I have long said LeBron James and his era of player walked through a door that there's no going back through. And this is not a knock at all. I'm probably a LeBron defender for the most part. But for those that are unaware, and I think most people now know with travel ball, especially baseball in particular, but travel basketball, etc., the way that it works in AAU is, you play for the indie runners, and you get beat by the Circle City Sizzlers. And the Circle City Sizzlers, when they beat you, are like, yeah, but that guy was really good for the Indy Runners. Like, we beat him, but he's really good. So they go to you and they say, hey, do you want to actually play with us now? Because we're on our way to regionals. So now you're playing for the Sizzlers when you were on the Runners before, but they defeated you, so you go and the Sizzlers pick you up. And you're playing like 100 games a summer. And if you lose in a big matchup, no worries. I got another game tomorrow. No worries. We got 2 more later this afternoon. So not only is the pain of losing diluted out a little bit, but also the vagabond nature as a player is instilled in you in normalcy at a younger age in the American culture of summer basketball. And you now have, like, the LeBron, Carmelo, and that era to now is the first generation of players with increase each and every year of players whose evaluation is taking place based on their summer play versus their high school play. So it is almost more important for them to play well for the City Sizzlers or the Indy Runners than it is to play for Pike or Lawrence North or North Central. And so it is a different mentality once they get into the NBA. I have always said, when LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and the dream team of that, and people had a problem with it and whatever else, I'm like, that team was put together during like a Nike All-American camp in a dorm somewhere 10 years prior, where they were sitting around and they're like, man, we get to the league, like we could do some things. Let's try to play together in the league. And I would guess, I don't know this, but I would guess that Michael Jordan had never met Scottie Pippen until the day that they were partners on the Chicago Bulls or around that time. I would guess that Reggie Miller and John Starks probably never met one another. And whereas today, the stars of the NBA, Jamal Murray and Devin Booker, bad example, same college, but you got to say, and whatever players that are young players in the NBA probably have cross-pollinated through AAU circuits a million times by the time they get to the league. And so the rivalry aspect of it is diluted a little bit, but the loyalty aspect of it absolutely is. And I think that, long-winded and circuitously here, the point that I'm agreeing with you on is I do think that teams are intrigued by European players whose mentalities have not been impacted or influenced by all of those circumstances.
And I think it matters a little bit more in a market like this, where it's going to be more difficult to attract free agents. And that's why, again, obviously Goga did not work out, and you had a logjam there, and for myriad of reasons. But that sort of thinking, I feel like for teams like Indiana, makes a little bit more sense. But, it goes back to this time last year. I mean, obviously, if you rewind 365 days, I was standing on a table for Benedict Mathurin. I don't know if I'm that way about any of these guys right now, but to me, Jarris Walker out of Houston, Taylor Hendricks out of Central Florida, those two stand out. And I can hear arguments on either side. Hendricks, you probably don't worry about him as much as a ability to stretch the floor on that end. Walker, it's maybe a little bit more interchangeable on the defensive end and maybe a better rebounder for you. But again, is he going to become a consistent shooter, or is it more of a liability of like at times I felt that way about Thad Young. It's like, do teams need to run out on Thad Young? Like, is he a shooter or is he not? That would probably be a question that you would have with a guy like Walker. But both of them, in different ways, they bring a defensive mindset, and we've watched this team play way too much basketball over the past few years where their defense is just horrific.
But by the way, did we just get over? Do you remember that time we were doing the show and all of a sudden all three of us almost passed out from like a weird kerosene smell? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It was like probably six months ago or so. Am I the only one that all of a sudden just got hit with a very pleasant aroma of like a coconut pineapple-y smell?
I'm not getting any kind of whiff of that over here.
I'm not. I thought I smelled bacon when I walked off the elevator this morning, and you want to talk about a kick in the you-know-what when you realized it was not bacon.
Yeah, who here would be making bacon before we get here? It ain't going to be the two of us, right?
I didn't know if Sean Copeland was cooking something up, down here.
Sean's always cooking something up.
All right, Scott.
That's why his show's so popular.
Coming up in 15 minutes. Again, the big news yesterday, non-Pacers trading for a future first-round pick. the All-Star game, we've got some clarity on what activities are going to look like coming up in February. Lucas Oil Stadium will be involved, and I think fans will be thrilled to hear about the number of people allowed and the price point inside of Lucas Oil Stadium coming up for the three-point contest, the dunk contest in February. We'll do that here about 15. Kevin Aquari, 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Get a Mike Woodson sighting tonight, Jake, in the green room with Jalen Hood-Schifino?
It'd be wise. I remember I have always said the year that Oladipo and Zeller were both taken in the lottery, the first coach to shake their hand, if I'm not mistaken, when their name was called, was John Calipari, who made a living being in the green room or near it during the NBA draft. And it was like, man, a lot of Kentucky players going, and they just kept loading up with those players, right?
Was it 2 and 4? Is that where Oladipo and Zeller went?
Correct.
Gosh, that is so high. We'll see tonight because we looked it up. That is the last time we have seen 2 Indiana players go in round 1. The Oladipo Zeller. Was it Anunoby and Thomas Bryant? That was a first rounder and then a second rounder.
Correct.
In that draft. We have not had that very often. And that goes back multiple decades now of 2 Indiana players in round 1. Obviously, Hood-Schifino will be a round 1 pick. We'll see if Trace Jackson-Davis sneaks in there.
That 2013 NBA draft, Zeller went 4th. Who are the players that they passed on to take Cody Zeller? Because that's what you look at, right? You go, wow, to take him 4th, that seems like a stretch. And then you look at it and you go, yeah, but who was – now, Giannis was 15th in that draft. Let me read you the names of the players that were selected before Giannis. Anthony Bennett was the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
This draft is absolutely awful.
Oladipo was 2nd. Otto Porter, Cody Zeller, Alex Len, Nerlens Noel, Ben McLemore, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Trey Burke, C.J. McCollum, Michael Carter-Williams, Steven Adams, Kelly Olynyk, Shabazz Muhammad, Giannis.
That's frightening. Obviously, McCollum, very good player. Giannis speaks for himself. Steven Adams, very nice career.
He's a good player.
Gosh, the whole draft. Oof, Plumlee. Oof.
I mean, the guy that went 1 pick after Giannis.
Oh, Rudy Gobert at 27. Yeah, that's an ugly one. That's a really ugly one. We're going to talk to Scott Agnes in a few minutes about this, but I really see very little questions or flaws with this announcement yesterday here locally from the NBA All-Star Committee. So the NBA All-Star Game is going to be here at Gainbridge Fieldhouse coming up in February. So what you typically get used to with the All-Star Game in an NBA arena, easy for me to say, will still be the same. Sunday night, February 18th. The Saturday night activities, though, with the dunk contest, the skills competition, the three-point contest, those activities are going to be over at Lucas Oil Stadium. What I like about that is you get attendance to increase from 17 or 18,000 at Gainbridge to 35,000 over at Lucas Oil. So you're going to get more people in the seats over there to experience All-Star Weekend in person. And the price point on these tickets range from $24 to $79. And us in Indiana, we get first dibs on 10,500 tickets. Those will go on sale July 24th just to those people here in the state of Indiana. From a appeal to the local market, a price point standpoint, and just a sheer number, yeah, the sight lines in there, they're not going to be ideal for those that have been to Final Four or Sweet 16 Elite 8 games. You know, every seat in the house isn't a great seat. But if you want to experience it and say that you've been there, I mean, hell, imagine spending $49 on an NBA game.
Yeah.
$49 an NBA game, you're up in the nosebleeds.
The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, this is the opposite of the way it was in '85 when the NBA All-Star Game was here. That particular weekend, all of the festivities took place at Market Square Arena, then the game itself at the Hoosier Dome. Now, opposite. Festivities, Dome, game itself, Gainbridge Fieldhouse. My assumption, Kevin, as I mentioned earlier, is that part of the reason why it would be in the NBA arena as opposed to kind of how they used to do it in yesteryear of the big, huge dome stadiums is probably contractual advertising, signage, etc., to benefit those corporations that are partnered with the Indiana Pacers and the NBA in that particular building.
If they sell really well, do you think they could expand the seating? Probably, like, Because, I mean, you're also going to get not people just from Indiana, but from Illinois, Ohio, Michigan might come down.
The only issue is you get some really bad sight lines.
That's true, but
you're
can
in
also
the end zone.
You can knock prices down even more then.
Yeah, it sounds like, based off the rendering that I saw yesterday, is you're going to have that curtain up on one side, obviously the side that extends to the rest of the football field, and on the other side of that curtain will be some concerts. So exactly how all that looks, I think, will be interesting to see. A couple other items to note. 2,400, I think I have that number right, 2,400 tickets will be purchased by the host committee, and they will be distributed to nonprofits and community organizations, so I'd love to see that. And also, from a transportation standpoint, it says, thanks in part to support from the Indianapolis Foundation and donors to the Championship Fund, Indigo bus rides will be free throughout All-Star Weekend, and I thought I saw that the Pacers bike shares will be free. Now, in February, I don't know if riding a bike is what you want to be doing, but kind of a cool gesture there from a transportation standpoint.
How much does Jim Irsay love this?
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
40% of every non-football related event, 40% of every dollar goes to the Colts as part of the lease agreement with Lucas Oil Stadium. So the Colts cashing in on that, baby.
Yeah, because at first I was thinking, boy, this would have taken some agreement from Lucas Oil and the Colts, and then Jim Irsay's probably like, $35,000 in there on a February Saturday night? Hell yeah.
Proud and proud.
That's right.
Rare air, right, to have an all-star event there inside.
That's rare air.
All chips in. Period.
You know, we'll see.
The period is the best part there, by the way.
Alex Pierce in the celebrity game.
For Alex Pierce. This one for Mr. Gilmore.
Blast them all off.
Oh, wow. Okay. We got a meeting
But
at
Gilmore's
11.
in Dallas right now, Mark.
He is. I'm sure he's still sharing a seat, maybe. You know, Gilmore and, Jerry Jones can share.
More on
Get your damn act together.
Sorry, Jerry.
More on that, more on tonight's NBA draft. Scott Agnes mentioned yesterday when the news was reported of the Pacers trading for a 2024 first-round pick that he had a feeling that this would maybe be just the start of some things. We'll talk with Scott about that here on the other side. Kevin and Query, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
This one for Mr. Gilmore.
I don't have the patience to jack with you today.
It has. Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
9 o'clock hour is underway. Jake Query, Kevin Bowen, Mark Dykton here. It is NBA Draft Day, as you just heard us talking about. Joining us now on the Payless Sickers Hotline to talk about exactly that. Kevin, should we just go ahead right away and ask him to tell us who the Pacers are going to take 7th?
I'm sure Scott Agnes loves questions like this. All right, Scott. Yeah, might as well. We're going to ask you at some point. The pick at number 7 will be who? Or will they make a pick at 7?
But yeah, I wish I knew, and I just quit my job and moved to Vegas or something. I'm disappointed I didn't get the intro from Jake, but I'll say it's Jarris Walker's. I'm staying with him from several weeks ago.
Okay. I'm flattered that you're disappointed you didn't get it from me, but
now,
yeah.
I did want to ask. You did a mock draft, correct, with other beat writers around the league?
Yeah. Dan Wilkie of the LA Times had one beat writer pick everyone in the first round.
And you did take Walker at 7. I really like the Andre Jackson pick that you made, and I know this was pre the Denver trade. Could you let us know who else was on the board when you took Walker at 7?
I think it was Taylor Hendricks. I think was.
So you went Walker over Hendricks.
I did do that one in particular. Yeah.
Any particular reason why? I feel like that's kind of the majority of people, but there certainly are some people out there that would like to see Hendricks over Walker. What made you go with Walker over him?
Yeah, so KB, I think Jarris is just more ready-made to step right in. He's got a bigger build to him. Like Taylor Hendricks is much kind of like Paul George, doesn't have an ounce of body fat on him at all. So I'm really trying to shore up the 3, more so the 4 spot. Walker's versatility defensively, really just his defense in general. I think he's one of those he's kind of a quiet assassin from what I see. He's not like a Kevin Garnett or Draymond Green that's going to scream in your face and make sure you know he's there. He's just going to go block your shot 3 times. I just really like all aspects of his game. The one area really that really separates Hendricks from him is more so his outside shooting, but it's not something that I don't think can't be there for Walker. It's just not something he's done a lot or at a very high level. But overall, to me, Jarris is the better player. Hendricks is just coming off a really impressive surge at UCF this past year. And I'm also a little bit skeptical of something like that in general. After one big surge, is there something more there? Or what's next? But Walker's been my guy, so I'm going to stay with him.
Do you think there's any chance, and by the way, there's a little bit more on Malcolm Brogdon in that trade that did not go, that we'll get to here in a second, Scott, that just came out. But do you think there's any chance that the only player, I would tend to agree with those names that we're talking about. I don't know why I feel this way. I really don't. But I have this weird feeling that Grady Dick may be more in play with Indiana or more intriguing to them than we might think, only because of his. I think he shot the ball really well, and they were intrigued by that. Is there any chance they would reach that far, Scott?
I just don't see it, Jake. Not at 7. I agree he would be a tremendous add to this team or others, but I see him more at 10, 11, 12. Kind of like we were talking last year, right? If the Pacers were able to obtain a second pick, then maybe something like Grady Dick makes a ton of sense because Rick Carlisle can't have enough shooters. We know how much that means to him. Grady Dick, the best shooter in this draft, over 40% from 3 last year, and he does a lot more than that. I know he gets pigeonholed as the shooter, but I still believe, that would be a reach at 7.
And Scott Agnes with us, Fieldhouse Files. He'll have your draft coverage deep into this Thursday night. Scott, you mentioned something yesterday when the Denver trade went down. Again, the Pacers are getting a first-rounder next year. In your tweet, you had said they are not done yet. Care to explain? Or expand, I guess?
I just mean in general, it's nothing specific or something I know or am teasing by any means. It's just they probably have at least one more pick than they want here. And on top of that, we know they're probably going to make some changes to the current roster, whether it be center, whether it be at shooting guard. So this team's going to be active here over the next week. They already have over the last 10 days or so, I think, going back to like last Monday in terms of starting to field calls and make more calls to kind of establish and figure out the value of the 7th pick and the others. And so in completing that deal, I think that's just kind of this first domino to what is a very important Pacers offseason. I was
a fan of this. I mean, again, to your point, you had a logjam of picks. You didn't have room to make 5 selections and have spots on your roster for all of these guys. And I just look at it as some point down the road, you hope to be in a position as a franchise to where you're doing and again, I know this is not a great example, but at the time you thought you were upgrading your roster. You're doing the Evan Turner. You're doing the Andrew Bynum type of move.
Mm-hmm.
Boston and Cleveland did it with you and Karis LeVert and Malcolm Brogdon, where they traded picks for players. At some point you're going to be a top 5-6 team in the East and having, multiple first-round picks for next year to potentially try and do that. Or maybe you're not in that position next year and you package those two and move up, higher into round one come next June. To me, keeping that optionality, to steal a word from Kevin Pritchard, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and just having additional trade assets. And we don't know the range of the pick, of course, for next year. It's just important to emphasize that it is not Denver's pick, because we know that one almost assuredly would be right, like 28, 29, 30. So it's like, all right, why do the deal? Well, after more discovery here after that trade, well, it's actually the worst of other teams. Is there's 4 different teams involved, and it'd probably be the Clippers pick, and maybe you project them to have the 20th pick again type thing next year. Maybe slightly worse if they have better health, so you're looking at 23. But more than anything, I think this is just spacing out those picks, and so you're not bringing in 5 rookies or even 3 first-round pick rookies at the same time, when already I think the Pacers are content with their youth. Outside of maybe adding the number 7 pick, then it's about adding one veteran, because we know they're veterans, and George Hill and James Johnson are both free agents this year, and then shoring up on the wing spot. And I do expect, just for how much they are talking to other teams about a wing, and the number of wings on the market and the lack of a true good market for free agency, I do expect them in the next week to really get in on a player via trade. I think that's in large part why I said, and they're not done yet.
Scott Agnes is our guest on the Payless Circus Hotline. Scott, obviously I did not hear this because it was during the time that we've been on the air, but I'm reading it. This apparently was said by Brian Windhorst, who I think is pretty knowledgeable, and because based on where this was sent out, I believe that he did say this. Quote, Brogdon, talking about Malcolm Brogdon. Brogdon has a health issue that, as I understand, is so significant that not only can the Celtics not do this trade, there's probably no Malcolm Brogdon trade that they can do in the short term, end quote. Would that be just part of, do you believe, like some of the injuries he's had with the Pacers, or is there just no way to know that at this point?
Yeah, first of all, I trust Wendy. He's one of the most plugged in there is in the NBA. And in terms of, I don't have knowledge of what it is, but I would guess Malcolm's body has just been so beat up with notable injuries and things I had never even heard of. Part of what he and the other players the last 3 or 4 years, when the Pacers are really down on injuries, took me through is learning these new injuries. And he had like a right abductor. It was like a right hip muscle tear. Well, I would guess it's something like that either he played through or was less significant to them than maybe one of these other teams had thought. But very likely than not, stuff like that, they try to keep mum just because if they do want to trade him. But that would absolutely come up in a physical that he must pass for a trade to go through.
Yeah, anytime you see a news item kind of like that, I don't know if it kind of spurs the same memories, but I do think about the Karis LeVert thing, Scott, from a couple of years ago. Was it a tumor in his kidney? Was that correct?
That's right, and only discovered because the Pacers took X-rays and MRIs leading to the physical, and it's something not every team does. That's not mandatory. Having a physical is, but doing extensive tests like that, they did one on his back, so who knows how long he had that tumor, and ultimately they had to remove that kidney, and not just presumably, they saved his life.
Scott, I was hoping you could share some thoughts, and again, Fieldhouse Files for Scott Agnes. Share some thoughts on your experience out in Utah last year for the All-Star Game. We saw the announcement yesterday. I'm a big fan of the fact that they'll be at Lucas Oil on Saturday night. You get more people in the building. Ticket prices seem to be very manageable for us here in Indy. The first third of those 35,000 tickets are going to go on sale next month, so we'll get an opportunity to get first dibs on them. I mean, that checks a lot of boxes for me. How would you compare the setup on paper here in Indianapolis to your experience in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, so I think 2 A's that are really big in this are kind of affordability and availability. And those are things that aren't usually the case with massive events like this, right? If you were trying to go to Indy Super Bowl, I would have loved to go. It would have been several $1,000s. Good luck. If you're trying to go to the All-Star Game on Sunday, I'm sure it's a 4-digit ticket at least. And one of the big hesitations the Pacers and other franchises have in hosting events like this is upsetting their season ticket holders and locals, in that they can't really attend these games. The NBA mostly runs these events. And so they come in and run it, and so that's a challenge for Indy and other cities. So I like this move, even if from a basketball standpoint, no, I don't want to sit on the sixth level and watch the guys through binoculars. But I can attend. I can be part of it. It might be the only time so many are able to attend events like this. Now, at Salt Lake City this past year, this was all held at their basketball arena, which is Vivint Arena. Will soon be the Delta Center once more. And so think about trimming the attendance number by probably at least 1,000 for other reasons, a stage, TNT set, some hospitality, probably by another 1,000 or 2 for the media and international media that come in. So you're only looking at like 14,000 seats is my rough estimate of the true capacity for events like this. And so now to beef it up to 35,000, and tickets aren't outrageous, starting at like $29. So I thought this was a win-win for Pacers, the host committee, the city, and really locals who want to just take part. We had that Super Bowl Village. In large part, there will be a fan fest as well as this Saturday night event that they're going to really try to make about Indy and people in town that can attend the event.
Scott, we were doing our own kind of draft lottery.
Okay.
You could pick one of these words, and then every time it's used on the television broadcast in the first round, you get $1. Okay? Your options are long.
So it's not take a shot. You said it was a drinking game.
Well,
earlier.
I think if it was a drinking game, we wouldn't make it past. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Long, upside, quickness, raw, wingspan, high motor, high IQ, athletic. Which one would you take?
I think upside would be the number one pick for me of that group.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these guys, well, yeah, because every player they're going to say they have. Okay, what about this? Floor ceiling. Would you take that over upside?
No, I would not take that over upside.
Okay, I'm going to go with long.
Yeah, you get a
I
Jay
think
Bills.
The next one would be wingspan. Wingspans are huge, and obviously, pun intended there. But that's something that teams and scouts really are paying attention to. So I think wingspan would be my second.
Get a Billis bingo card going for tonight and the coverage
and
of the
then throw
draft.
basketball IQ in there for third.
Sure. Scott, last one for me. I want to go back to the All-Star weekend, and I don't think you mentioned this. So you're guessing around 14,000 for Sunday for the actual All-Star game back at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Is that right?
Yeah, that'd be my rough guess.
Okay.
I was thinking about that yesterday. Yeah.
How do those tickets get distributed? Again, to me, it's going to be a much pricier ticket, but will a section of those be available for the community at all, or is that much more of a corporate feel? And maybe I don't know, do they give 100 to each team? I have no idea how tickets get divided for the All-Star game.
Yeah, my understanding, Kevin, is that that's all NBA. So it's league officials, it's teams, it's really league partners more than anything. And so they come in and will kind of run that show. That's why the Pacers is able to move Saturday night, opens it up to a whole new audience. Whereas, I know so many Pacers season ticket holders that are 6 months out already concerned. They're not sure they're going to even be able to attend Sunday's event. And yeah, that's the concern. I'm not sure if they're going to even have access to pay thousands of dollars for that ticket. That's why this is so important.
So if you have a suite for the Pacers season, you do not have a suite for All-Star game.
Great question. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll go back to what I believe NBA completely comes in and takes over.
Got it.
Okay, to put a bow tie on all of it, Scott Agnes, Payless Liquors Hotline, our guest. 3 picks for the Pacers tonight. Do you believe, so 2-part question. The first is...
4. We got 4.
They got 7, 26, and 50, right?
40. They
that's right. They picked up the 40. Right.
Yep.
And 55.
55. So do they stay with those 4, 7, 26, 40, 55? Do they stay there, or is there still movement left to go? And I guess you answered the other one, which is, Walker going with the first one, in your opinion.
Yeah, I would say it's more likely than not that they get involved in another deal of some kind, whether it's packaging several of the picks to move up some spots and go get a guy that they're feeling very good about, or whatever. Again, I don't think they need 4 picks at that, and so I would I would more likely than not expect for a trade to go down. And then, in terms of my pick, I'm staying with power forward Jarris Walker from Houston.
Does Trace Jackson Davis get discussed within the war room, and is it possible that he ends up with, like, let's say 4? I don't think he'll be there at 40, but if he is, is there a chance he ends up here?
Yeah, I think so. I think he would be an excellent pick at 40. It's really I thought he might be an option at 32, but now that you don't have that, 26 is very early for me.
That's right about the time I think his name. I told Kevin, when they have that list on the right-hand side of best player available, I think right around 26 is when his name starts showing up at the bottom of that list, right?
And that's fair because I think anywhere from 24 to 40. I think that's kind of Sacramento's at 24. They were very high on him, really liked his workout, could like him next to or behind the lineup and Sabonis and playing the 3 and 4 spot. So, yeah, I agree with that. For the Pacers in particular, though, I felt he was more 30 to 35. I would have been content with taking him if he was available then.
Over under 3.5 cups of coffee today, Scott.
Oh, over. Absolutely.
Is that a daily over, or is it just a special occasion for tonight?
No, I'm probably 2 to 3 plus each day, so I'll easily blow past the 3.5 today. No problem.
He's got a drip of dark roast at his house right now that he just literally an IV just right by his bedside. Scott, I know it was, I guess, somewhat of an early morning for you hopping on with us. It's going to be a late night tonight. Good luck. Great work with your draft coverage, and we'll be chatting with you next week about it all.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys, as always.
Scott Agnes, Fieldhouse Files. Is he new to 3 tomorrow, Mark? I probably should have asked him. He's been filling in a little bit.
More fun, NFL draft or NBA draft?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think you go further. I think you go further in the NBA draft with players that people are overly familiar with.
Oh, I would disagree. I think you go further NFL draft with that. I mean, you had like Stetson Bennett as a round 4 pick.
Well, I mean, obviously because there are more rounds and you get, but I'm saying like of the marquee players, like in the first round, I think there are more players that go in the first round of the NBA draft that people saw. It's a little different now because of all the international stuff, admittedly, and the one and done. But you have players that people are like, because there's only 5 guys on the floor in a college game, and like through the NCAA tournament and things like that, people at least are familiar with them. Whereas unless it's a specialty position in the NFL, I mean, I don't know how many people are overly familiar with like a right guard from Florida that goes 18th overall to the Lions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just let's look at the first 6 or 7 picks from tonight. Was Jarris Walker the only one that played in the NCAA tournament? I mean, Wembanyama, no. I guess Brandon Miller.
But I mean, yeah.
Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, the Thompson brothers, no one has really seen. Cam Whitmore,
but
Villanova.
People are familiar with them because they're. I mean, you've seen a million. Like I don't know how to word what I'm saying. I think it's easier to you see highlights of the Thompson brothers and Wembanyama, and you automatically are from. It's easier to see what they do. Whereas, how many people? And I know people are going to claim that they can, but how many average Joe sports fans, when they see video of Notre Dame and Quentin Nelson, are like, "Oh, I can see it right there." You know what I mean? Like, I think it is more like just basketball highlights in general. It's easier to become familiar with a guy.
I think what I like about the NBA draft is honestly the pace of it.
Well, yeah, for sure.
And now I sound like an old man, but
no, for sure.
5 minutes for every pick in round 1, 2 minutes in round 2. And the other thing I really like, I love when they get the grainy international film. And here comes Fran Fraschilla onto the screen.
What have I always said? Like,
he's 2 years away from being 2 years away.
Here's a guy that played basketball at the Tabernacle Gym in Croatia on a Zapruder film with a Voight basketball.
Jay, let me tell you, he averaged 6.3 points and 2.4 rebounds, but he's got a ton of potential. And then, lo and behold, the guy turns into Luka Doncic or something.
Give me a year. This is one of my favorite things to do. Give me a year, 1998 to 2010.
Let's go the year I graduated high school, 2008.
The 2008 NBA draft, okay? Do we have the jingle, Mark? We'll do a reenactment here.
The Mayo plop.
The 2008 NBA draft. Mark Dykton, you please give me number 1 through 30.
12.
With the 12th pick in the 2008 NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings select Jason Thompson from Rider University.
I think the Mayo plop is perfect for that one.
Man, that did not go well. Now, when they selected Jason, they passed on Brandon Rush, who went next.
Oh, hell yeah.
Followed by Anthony Randolph, Robin Lopez. Roy Hibbert was 17th. Javal
Was 2008
McGee 18th.
all the point guards? Was that the Steph Curry draft?
No, he was 07, wasn't he?
Was he?
08 was Derrick Rose, Michael Beasley, O.J. Mayo. That one up in smoke. Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love, Danilo Gallinari. Danilo Gallinari wasn't a bad
He
player.
got traded yesterday, right? He was a part of that three-teamer?
Danilo?
I think so.
He's turned out to be a decent, I mean, again, not a franchise player, but a decent player. Eric Gordon was 7th. How about Joe Alexander, 8th?
Ooh, the West Virginia guy.
Yeah.
That's a decent draft. You said Love, Westbrook. Gordon, turned out to be a fine NBA
Okay,
player.
the 07 draft, that's
the heavy point guard.
Steph Curry was 09, by the way.
09.
Oh, it's
okay,
09
sorry.
then. Okay, that was Rubio and Johnny Flynn and Steph
That
Curry,
was
right?
one of the great draft head-scratch moments of all time, was Minnesota taking Ricky Rubio and Johnny Flynn back-to-back. Back-to-back.
With Steph on the board, right?
Steph went 7th.
You imagine? I mean, I know hindsight is so 20/20. I did like Johnny Flynn's headband at Syracuse.
Steph went 7, and then Jordan Hill, DeMar DeRozan, Brandon Jennings, Terrence Williams, Gerald Henderson.
Jordan Hill, former Pacer.
Tyler Hansbrough, 13th.
Someone texted me earlier comparing Trace Jackson Davis to Hansborough. Agree, disagree?
I think that's fair coming out of college because Hansbrough was a guy that was thought to be somebody that had a really good, keen sense of where the basket was on the low block offensively.
Certainly wasn't shooting threes.
Correct. Couldn't step out. Did what he did very, very well, but was limited in that area. And I think Jackson Davis is kind of seen that way, although I think he's starting to show a little more than perhaps Tyler Hansbrough did coming out through the workout process. The funny thing about that draft, the Pacers got killed for it because they took Hansbrough 13th and needed a point guard. And after that, 17th, Drew Holiday, 18th, Ty Lawson, 19th, Jeff Teague, 21st, Darren Collison.
Gosh, where was Drew Holiday?
17, did I say?
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
So you ended up having, here's what's funny about it. You passed on taking a point guard to take Tyler Hansbrough. And then, within 10 picks, 4 point guards came off the board, 3 of which ended up playing for your franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lawson looked like a fullback at one point, late in his career.
Yeah. I think Lawson had some
Pearl
issues.
Street Pizza, maybe. For Ty Lawson.
Have you had that Pearl Street Pizza?
Very good.
Yeah, not a bad place.
Very good. Can I great work by you. Max was crying last night around midnight. I roll over. I'm like, wow, Jake just sent the whole pop quiz.
Yeah.
Do you care if I throw in one question?
No.
Okay.
Which one do we take out?
It was heavy draft centric, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I will look at it here. How about you lead off the check down here, and I will make one amendment to it.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
It wasn't a bad
Mark
pop.
Dykton one to tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah,
it wasn't a bad pop quiz, though, right?
No, I thought it was very good. Yeah.
Break
Nothing
up the
against you,
Cincinnati Redlegs, 11
Don't look
straight now.
but here come the Redlegs.
Longest streak for the Reds since 1957. They beat the Rockies yesterday 5-3.
Someone did text me yesterday and said, if they win 20 in a row, will you go streaking around Monument Circle?
You personally?
Yeah.
Why does everyone want you taking your clothes off?
I think it was a female listener for what it's worth as well.
Who was the guy that called last week and said they wanted you like mowing the lawn in a thong or something?
Yeah,
Were
I did.
you there for that
I
show?
know. Well, JMV asked me, he was like, are you going to take your shirt off and we're going to auction off you mowing your lawn shirtless?
I think you were out on Friday and somebody called in and said, I think Kevin should do it in a thong. I said, why are we taking clothes off of Kevin?
What
I
are
don't
we
understand.
Is
doing?
the Tiger Woods thong that wasn't purchased?
I don't know, but I'm curious why everybody's so anxious for KB to be taking
No
parts
shock.
of clothes off.
No shock there.
Cubs over the Pirates 8-3. It was the Tigers over the Royals yesterday. Diamondbacks did win for Mark. Oakland Athletics were losers, so too was Cute Fella. Race for PBR.
Indians home all weekend long. They split the doubleheader. 7:05 first pitch tonight over at Victory Field. Speaking of tonight, the College World Series, it's going to be LSU and Wake. The winner takes on Florida for the best of 3 series from Omaha. Great pitching matchup by all accounts tonight. Top 15 projected picks for LSU and Wake Forest on the mound from Omaha. So we are about to be down to 2 in the College World Series.
You're just breaking them all out today, are you, Mark?
Is that Coach Dean?
Uh-huh.
Do we have the full rundown from him on that, by the way?
No, I just have the
full rundown is pretty good. Fever got Seattle tonight. That's a 10 o'clock tip. Pacers got 4 picks. Again, it's been confusing, so we probably should reconfirm this. 7, 26, 40, 55. Those are the selections for the Pacers.
And again, they shipped out their 29th and 32nd pick tonight.
Correct.
To Denver. They get back Denver's 40th and a first-rounder next year, which is attached to the performance of 4 different franchises and most likely is going to be somewhere in the 20s.
It's a good way to explain it.
Okay.
If it was this year, they would, I think, have the 20th or 21st pick.
Man, that'd be...
So basically, they moved back 8 spots and they moved up 8 spots, which I guess cancel each other out.
And they gave themselves a little bit more. They gave themselves a year to figure out what to do with a surplus of picks.
Good work. I'm a fan of it. Mentioned it yesterday. Like to see what I saw yesterday afternoon by the Pacers. All right, pop quiz time. 317-239-1070. Again, a slight amendment. Jake with a terrific pop quiz, but we'll throw out number 5. I'll toss one in here to end the pop quiz. Jiffy Lube oil change up for grabs. Give us a call for the pop quiz.
In New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. We're going to California.
It's like a college
and
football
Texas
head coach
and New
on
York.
his recruiting
We're
trail.
going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House.
Imagine the possibilities of getting the backyard.
107.5 The Fan. Have you studied? Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with Kevin and Query. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
All right, Mark, we have callers lined up.
That we do.
I'm deep in draft research.
One of my questions on this is one of my favorite trivia questions ever.
Is that the IU one?
No.
Oh.
Question number 2.
So the streak stopped in 2020, Jake, looks like. The streak would be a Indiana high school product going in round 1 of the NBA draft. 2021. Desmond Bain was the last pick in 2020. 2019, you had Romeo. 2018, Jaren Jackson Jr. But yeah, I'm looking at the 2021 NBA draft, and unless I'm missing somebody, I'm not seeing anybody.
So 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Last year, 3 of them, you said?
Yeah, right? Because you had LaRavia, Ivy, and then Blake Wesley, right?
Yeah. And obviously tonight, Trace Jackson Davis would be the one, potentially.
If he goes in the first round, yeah. So that's 3, so let's go with number 3. How's that sound, Kevin?
Okay. Who we got, Mark?
David.
How y'all doing?
David, how are you doing, man? You sound like you're ready to go.
Hell yeah, I'm doing better now, guys. I didn't think I'd get on there, but I'm glad I did. Let's do this.
David, have you called the program before?
Love your energy.
Man, I've called about 100 times about our Colts, how disappointing they were last year, but hopefully we'll get turned around and go forward from now on in.
Hey, hope is alive and well. David, have you had coffee today?
About 3 cups.
Love it.
David, what line of work are you in?
I work for the largest retail people in the world. So I work for Walmart.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, okay.
That's the number one. That's the largest employer in the United States, is it not?
I believe so. Yes.
And you work at which location, if you don't mind me asking?
Greencastle.
Oh, okay.
Greencastle, Indiana. I'm out of Terre Haute, Indiana.
Oh.
Wow. Okay.
Do you like when kids are on campus or no?
No, it don't bother me none. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I really enjoyed it when the Colts were at Rose Holman back in the '90s. Gave us a boost of energy when Peyton Manning and Edward James and everybody was there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Now David, when I was covering the Rams, they had their training camp at Western Illinois in Macomb, Illinois, and one day out of nowhere, the coaching staff decided to give the players the day off, but they had to be back at 5 p.m., and the only place to go was Walmart. And, literally the entire Rams roster was, hanging out playing video games at Walmart. Now, did the Colts ever show up at the Terre Haute Walmart?
No, but I'll tell you a quick story real quick. They used to show up at B-Dubs right there on South Terre Haute all the time. They used to block off B-Dubs right there in South Terre Haute by the fairgrounds. They used to block it all off for the Colts.
Nice.
Mike Vanderjack used to be down there acting like an idiot and just crazy. You know what I mean?
Booger McFarland's throwing wings back.
Uh-huh.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right, David, I'm going to have Kevin lead you off. He'll do questions 1, 3, and 5, and I'll do 2 and 4. Kevin, let it rip.
David's energy. Gosh, I'm feeling a 5 for 5. All right, David, it's an 11-game win streak from the Reds. Who was the last team, and I guess we just kind of talked about the city, who was the last team to beat them? The Dodgers, the Royals, the Cardinals, or the Pirates?
Pirate.
Jake, you would say that fans of this team called it the greatest win in the history of baseball?
That's right, the smartest win ever.
Uh-huh.
Best fans in baseball.
Yeah.
You got a second guess by chance, David? Stay on I-70 for another 2.5 hours.
Cardinals.
Okay. Question number 2. Tonight is the NBA draft, of course. Who is the last college senior, the last 4-year college player that was taken number 1 overall in the NBA draft? Was it Elton Brand of Duke, Kenyon Martin of Cincinnati, Emeka Okafor of Connecticut, or Tim Duncan of Wake Forest?
Tim Duncan, Wake Forest.
How about this? This guy's nickname is competitor of where you work.
He's got a son in the NBA right now, right?
That's right. Elton Brand, Kenyon Martin, Emeka Okafor.
Brandon. I don't know.
Okay, Kevin?
I don't know.
Number 3 here, David. Purdue has had 2 players drafted number 1 in the NBA draft. Glenn Robinson is one. Name the other. Jay Nivey, Rick Mount, Terry Dissinger, or Joe Barry Carroll?
The last one.
Nice.
I bombed these.
No, you're doing okay, David.
You didn't bomb that one.
Question number 4. Indiana has also had 2 players selected number 1 in the NBA draft. Kent Benson is one. Name the other. Is it Isaiah Thomas, Walt Bellamy, Scott May, or George McGinnis?
Isaiah Thomas.
Okay.
All right, and number 5 here, David. Name the state of Indiana high school product who averaged the most points per game in the NBA last season. Is it A, Gordon Hayward, B, Eric Gordon, C, Jaren Jackson Jr., or D, Desmond Bain?
Number 2, the second one.
Eric Gordon?
Yeah.
It's a pretty good guess.
Where would he rank on career NBA points, do you think, for Indiana high school products?
Oh, boy.
Somewhat up there.
Top 3 or 4.
Oh, he'd be that high?
I mean, I think Oscar's number 1. Well, Bird.
Yeah,
Bird or
and
Oscar.
were the first 2 that
and then,
jumped out at me.
I mean, Gordon's got to be, I'll look it up, but Gordon's got to be pretty high.
Conley
be high based on tenure. Randolph would be high. Zach Randolph would be high.
He could fill it up. He could fill it up there.
Let's see how you did, David, and thanks for calling in, by the way. Enjoy your day out in Wally World. St. Louis Cardinals was correct for question number 1.
Okay. Beautiful ambiance there. He got Joe Barry Carroll correct, right?
That is correct.
Number 3, is that it?
Yeah, because question number 2, the last number 1 overall pick that was a 4-year college player was Kenyon Martin of Cincinnati to the Nets. Joe Barry Carroll was correct. Walt Bellamy, by the way. Isaiah Thomas in 81 was taken a pick behind Mark Aguirre.
Desmond Bain, also number 5, 21.5 points per game. Eric Gordon, just 13.1 last year. Jaren Jackson Jr. averaged 18.6, and Gordon Hayward, 14.7. Kenyon Martin went 1 overall with a broken leg.
He did.
I always remember Kenyon Martin with the lips tattoo.
Yeah, he was a Denver Nugget for a while, right?
Yeah.
Larry Bird is 13 all-time on the scoring list. I will look it up and on the other side tell you where the others rank.
Okay. I like it.
I would have thought Oscar was higher.
So
but I guess longevity there.
Indiana high school products where they rank on the NBA's all-time scoring list. We'll do that and close it out previewing tonight's draft here. Kevin Aquari, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Evan and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
So I was wrong. For some reason, when I toggled it on the NBA scoring list, I was looking at playoff totals. The all-time scoring list in the NBA, Oscar Robertson would be the highest among Indiana high school players. Larry Bird is second. No surprise there. Then it goes Zach Randolph, Mike Conley, Glenn Robinson, Eric Gordon.
Forgot about the big dog.
Yeah. I mean, Glenn Robinson was a really good – I think people forget, Kevin, because there was so much expectation. When Glenn Robinson's year at Purdue in his junior year, so he played as a sophomore. He was obviously a Prop 48. I don't mean obviously but I'm saying people that remember, he did not play his freshman year because of Prop 48. Then he played as a sophomore and was obviously really good. His junior year, I think, still is the most dominant college basketball season I've ever seen. There is just no way to properly illustrate how unbelievably, seemingly unstoppable Glenn Robinson was in that junior year at Purdue.
Didn't Zach Edey just have that?
Just different, man. I'm telling you. Yes, but, well, first off, what did Edey average this year?
It's a good question. I don't know. 20 is 24 sound right?
Okay, I'm looking up what Robinson's totals were. I mean, Zach Edey was really, really good. There's no doubt about it. No denying that. But Glenn Robinson there was just something about, in Glenn Robinson's junior year at Purdue, he averaged 30.3 points and 10 rebounds a game. So he averaged 30 a game. And I mean, I'm talking like,
yeah, that's obviously a lot more than Zach.
And he had a 42-point game, I think it was, against Illinois. His dunk over Ostertag in the tournament. He was just so menacing and dominating. My favorite story about Glenn Robinson, because he's my class of high school, so, there's probably a little bit of bias, admittedly. But my buddy that played at Northwestern and had played AAU ball with Glenn, so he knew him, and he goes to midcourt before the game, hey, Glenn, what's up, whatever. And Glenn Robinson looks right at him and looks right at him. And they'd been teammates forever. It was like Danny Rojas when he found out he was going to be on the international team and was going to be playing against one of his teammates. He looked right at my buddy and said, "You're going to tell your kids about the way that I'm about to shake the blank out of you." And there was nothing. He's like, yeah, well, he was right. He was so good. And I thought for certain when he went number one overall in '94, which was the biggest uncertainty, the biggest certainty ever. Like, there was no question he was going to go number one. I really thought he was going to be a transcendent, like almost Jordan-level player. I think most people did think that of him. I remember the talk that he was going to get the first ever $100 million contract right out of the box. And he was a really good player in Milwaukee. But it was, he was with a middling Bucks team. He was averaging 20 a game in the NBA for a long time, and then ended up getting a ring in San Antonio just late in his career. But he just was different. There was just something about him that was different.
Quick scroll of the active NBA scoring list. Conley 18th, Eric Gordon 31st, Gordon Hayward 38th.
I would think Gordon you would think is higher, but I think injuries probably, right?
George Hill 62nd. I think a lot of people look ahead to tonight, and for the most part, the first three picks are pretty locked in. I don't know if there's a ton of indecision at Houston at 4. It seems like Detroit at 5. That is where I've seen even a Jarris Walker, and a few people have had Taylor Hendricks at 5. And you think about Detroit, it makes sense. You've got Cade Cunningham and Jay Ivey. You would think that next piece for them is a little bit more of a wing, bigger, 4 guy.
Kind of the same situation the Pacers are in, right?
Yeah, in a way, certainly. And obviously the fact that they are in the Central with Indiana plays into it, but that's going to be something that I think for Pacers fans, just watch out for a little bit there of what Detroit does at 5. I think we'll have some direct impact on the Pacers there.
Somebody, we were just asked for the station for our prediction who they're going to take or what they're going to do. I would tend to agree with you that it's probably going to be one of those two guys, Walker or Hendricks, just for the sake of diversity. of possibility, I'm going to say that the Pacers, and I don't know that they do it at 7, but I'll say they take Grady Dick tonight.
Really? So if it's not at 7, that would be quite the trade-up. I mean, because 26 is where they're at next. So is that a 26 and a player? Probably
No, I mean, yeah, I'm just saying, like, do I think they're going to take him? No, but if I had to pick somebody other than Walker or Hendrick, that's who I would go with.
Yeah, I went with Hendricks when they asked us for that. Part of me thinks Walker could be gone at 7. And I probably have Hendricks a little bit closer to Walker than most would.
This is a good question. You know, in terms of tonight with Wembanyama, the last player that you can think of that had this much intrigue or expectation.
I got to go back to LeBron. I mean, I know people have said Zion, but I don't think it's to this level. I mean, ESPN sent Brian Windhorst over there for a 90-second interview to Paris the night of the lottery. Like, it just, to me, it's different. The international appeal of the NBA game, Jake, I think has grown, so that contributes to some of it. The fact that he looks the way he looks, and I'm not trained. I mean, he's 7'4" and can move like a wing and can shoot it from the volleyball line.
It's amazing. I mean,
and I think his English is good. Like, I think he'll be a big brand. I mean, his English is pretty good.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I don't. I think you got to go back to LeBron.
A player.
Would you say Zion, or would you go all the way back to LeBron?
I would agree with you on LeBron. I'll tell you another player that was and it's fascinating to me how fast this player has fallen out of the public conscience. But Yao Ming was the same way.
Yeah.
Now, he was before LeBron, I think a year before, right? But Yao Ming was so different and skilled and, I mean, just massive. And there was a ton, and he was a good player.
And in a part of the world that we hadn't seen NBA prospects from.
And then, boom, like, when it was over for him, it was over. He just was, obviously, he was hurt a lot.
He was a good NBA player.
He was, I know.
Yeah, I mean, very good NBA player. But that
what would you believe Yao Ming's career numbers to be?
I'm going to say Yao Ming averaged 16 a game.
His career, he averaged 19 and 9.
Yeah.
In 07, he averaged 25 a game. In 08, he averaged 22 and 11.
How many years for Yao?
He ended up playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons. But he didn't play a complete season after his first 2. I mean, his last 3 years in the league, 55, 77, and 5 games. You know,
it's kind of wild that China hasn't produced anybody of somewhat note since
they had
him.
Fanboy, why didn't the
Fanboy Zhang?
Yeah.
Why didn't he go number 1 overall?
Well, he was too busy asking for autographs and selfies.
Yeah, clanking a few shots in Vegas.
That was his downfall.
But he, with Yao Ming, the numbers that he put up. Basketball's just changed, Kevin, to the point where even in the last 10 years, a double-double of 20 and 10 was in 08 was kind of not an anomaly, but I mean, that was impressive. Now you've got guys that are not huge stars that are walking double-doubles. You know what I mean? But he was a really good player and a skilled player. And I would agree with you, like, it is surprising, especially considering how much he must have put basketball on the map in China. It's surprising that there have not been other players. I mean, obviously his size is pretty unique, but that you haven't seen kind of that product.
Corey goes, I was at Yao Ming's debut game. It was here in Indy against the Pacers. I don't recall that. Do you? That would have had to have been a massive game. From a media standpoint.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I remember...
Can you imagine?
I remember Brad Miller calling him Yao Blanken Ming because he'd been asked about him so much.
I mean, the amount of Japanese media that follows Hideki Matsuyama around the PGA Tour, easily the biggest media scrums week in and week out. And I would assume, based off the uniqueness of a athlete from that country coming over here to America, I would just assume that China would have had a similar contingent following Yao around. Probably much bigger, honestly.
Oh, I mean, I'm looking here. You're saying in 2002, I don't think Houston.
Corey goes, I was at Yao Ming's debut game. It was against the Pacers here in Indy. Would that have been a preseason game?
That may be, because I can't imagine. Maybe he's right. I'm looking up the 02 Houston Rockets season, the 02-03 Rockets season, where they started, to see if they began there. I mean, I'm not like doubting the guy, but
I feel like that would have been something you would have remembered. I mean, you would have been covering that game, right, Jake?
Correct. No, he's right. Wednesday, October 30th, 2002, at Indiana.
Good work, Corey. How did Yao do? Do we have a box score?
I'm looking right here at the box score. Yao Ming.
Yao Ming. Do you remember that song?
No, hold on.
They had a Yao Ming song.
I don't see. Oh, Yao Ming. Here we go. He played 10 minutes. He went 0 for 1 from the floor. That's probably why we don't remember it as much.
Brad Miller shut him down.
That's right.
Jeff Foster shut him down.
Feisty Foster. Jeff Foster, by the way, a draft night trade acquired. If either one of you guys gets this right, I will go down right now and I will buy you a salad from the place that closed on the Circle. It's not there anymore. Jeff Foster was acquired on a draft night trade for what player that the Pacers had selected?
Vonteego Cummings.
That is correct.
Okay.
I owe you a salad from the salad place. It's no longer there on the Circle.
What happened there? You were. I thought you were keeping that place in business.
I don't know. You know what I think happened? I don't know this. I think they had, and it was a great place, and it was packed. And you're right. Gary Dick and I kept him in business, at least theoretically. I think they got, coming off of everything that happened in downtown Indy, I think that they got a really good deal on their lease from downtown. Like the downtown just wanted businesses back in the area, and I think they got probably like a 1 year or an 18-month lease at a really good rate. And then once that went out, they were like, okay, like now it's time to start paying regular lease, and they were like regular rent, and they're like, yeah, we're good. I would guess.
So do I get lunch, or I mean, what is this?
How did you know that?
Empty. I love Jeff Foster. Love him. Vonteego Cummings, from some reason, Pittsburgh's popping in my head. Does that sound right?
I thought he was from a Tennessee school. Like,
and then was Foster Texas State?
I think Foster was Southwest Texas, right?
Was it the Warriors? Is that the team that they traded with?
Correct. That is correct. Look at you. This must have been like peak Kevin Bowen staying up popping popcorn to watch the draft.
Vonteego Cummings, Pittsburgh.
Nice.
Boy, a heavy international career. Played for the Westchester Wildfire. All right, I'll say Taylor Hendricks, Jake, Grady Dick, if not Jarris Walker, and then Grady Dick.
That Westchester Wildfire on their airplane road games, you should see the way they took off.
See ya.